Welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session, March 10th, 2026. This meeting is called to order. Roll call, I'm not going to call because everybody's here. If you'd take note on that, that'd be awesome. With that, Ms. Barr, if you go ahead and get us going.
Update on the city's Americans with Disability Act and Accessibility Program.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This presentation will provide a high-level update on the city's ADA and accessibility program. The goal is to explain federal regulations, share where Glendale stands today, and outline the phased approach underway. This is an informational item and does not request an action by Council. ADA is a federal civil rights law that applies to all state and local governments, covering facilities, programs, services, and digital content. Compliance is ongoing with focus on providing meaningful access to city services. Under ADA Title II, cities are required to designate an ADA coordinator, develop and update a transition plan that includes facilities, programs, services, and digital content by identifying and prioritizing barriers, which a barrier is anything preventing someone with a disability from accessing city services in the same way as others. How we gather information is flexible, but the obligation to assess and document corrective actions is mandatory. Equally important, cities must show momentum and progress in corrections. This matters because accessibility ensures residents and visitors of all abilities can participate in city services. Also, it provides usability for everyone and supports inclusive community engagement. Federal review generally focuses on planning, prioritization, and documented progress. Across the country, reviews consist of whether cities have current ADA transition plans, have identified accessibility barriers, and are demonstrating ongoing progress. Common issues identified nationwide include outdated transition plans, inaccessible pedestrian routes and/or facilities, and digital accessibility challenges. In some cases, cities work with the Department of Justice, DOJ, through settlement agreements that establish timelines for updating plans and addressing accessibility improvements. Glendale has made progress by designating an ADA coordinator, updating policies and procedures, initiating facility evaluations, enhancing digital accessibility, and milestones for updating the transition plan. As a city, we are approaching ADA compliance using a phased framework. This structure helps ensure work is organized, manageable, and aligned with available resources. Phase 1 focuses on building the foundation for the program, including assessments, governances, and planning. Phase 2 moves into implementation, addressing identified barriers and aligning accessibility improvements with capital projects and operational updates. Phase 3 focuses on ongoing monitoring and updates to ensure the city continues making progress over time. Phase 1 is where the city currently focused at. This phase established the foundation for the ADA program. Key activities include onboarding of our ADA consultant, establishing an internal ADA committee, conducting facility evaluations, and updating the city's ADA transition plan. Facility evaluations help identify accessibility barriers in buildings and public spaces. The transition plan then documents those barriers and prioritize improvements based on impact and available resources. Staff will use this same process to evaluate programs, services, and digital content to incorporate it into the transition plan. Once barriers are identified and prioritized in Phase 1, the program moves into the implementation. Phase 2 focuses on addressing accessibility improvements. This includes incorporating barrier removal into capital projects, improving digital accessibility, and addressing program access issues where needed. And it's possible for Phase 1 and Phase 2 to overlap. Phase 3 focuses on monitoring and maintaining progress. ADA compliance is ongoing, so this phase ensures accessibility improvements continue over time and the transition plan remains current. Federal regulations encourage public participation in ADA planning. Community feedback helps identify barriers that may not be visible through technical assessments alone, and it helps ensure the transition plan reflects real experiences of residents. Community outreach is ongoing. Upcoming engagement includes information tables at the city's main and foothills libraries and the Glendale Adult Center on March the 20th, as well as Glendale Live on March the 21st with the assistance from the Commission on Community and Culture. Following outreach efforts, the ADA committee will review community feedback and incorporate such findings into the ADA transition plan. Facility evaluations will continue and priorities will be refined. Staff will also coordinate improvements related to programs, services, and digital accessibility and align recommendations with capital planning and budget process. This concludes the high-level informational presentation. I look to council for any feedback.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. My one question is, what is digital accessibility remediation? What does that mean?
Mayor, council members, it's when you look at our website to ensure that there is accessibility for anyone that has a disability. For an example, if someone that has a disability or visually impairment, we should have accessibility software that will be able to help them to be able to navigate through our website.
Okay, and that's something we don't currently have?
Mayor and council, it is something that we do currently have with the city doing the overhaul of our website entirety, but we're in the process of doing almost like a check and balance to make sure it's absolutely in compliance with the ADA regulations.
Okay, very good. And then I have another question. So a lot of this is going to require, and I know I'm putting this closer, I've talked about our parks, accessibility in our parks, and that's going to be part of a piece of this anyway. But how is this going to work as far as budget? Is each area going to have a line in their budget for, you know, a capital cost to bring things into, how are we going to be able to identify capital projects that are related to this ADA compliance?
Mayor and council, through the transition plan, we do an assessment for all the facilities, the programs, and the services. We identify what the barriers are, and then with the team or the committee, we kind of do an assessment of what we believe needs to take place for these in compliance barriers to come into compliance. We assess an estimate of what that cost would be, and then we will provide that information to the appropriate departments that will oversee it, and it will be up to that department to allocate the resources for those improvements. But keep in mind that in this transition plan, it's not intended that everything needs to be completed or updated quickly. You're looking at an active document, a living document that can continuously have updates. And in that transition plan, we can identify in which phase an update will occur. So it can be within 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or 10 to 15 years. So it'll be ongoing, and it will be brought back before council in the capital improvement budget or other operational budgets.
Okay, so thank you for that. Mayor, if I could, so let's just say, for example, I don't know, I'm just going to use the playground surface. As those get replaced by a surface that's accessible for people with mobility issues, is it going to be identified in the budget, in the CIP, as it going to have like some sort of subset or something, so we recognize that it's part of bringing, of getting us compliant in a variety of areas? Are we going to be able to recognize that when we look at the CIP? That's what I'm asking.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Tomaltroff, in some cases, it'll be included as part of a project, and in those cases, we haven't identified them as separate line items, but if it's part of a park project, it will be included in that budget. In some other cases, for example, facilities has a budget now to do some ADA compliance types of items, especially if it's something that the committee identifies that needs to be done sooner, then there would be a major upgrade to that building, for example. So it's a mix, I would say, of both. Sometimes we'll have it as a line item, sometimes it may be part of a department's budget, and other times it may be part of the CIP project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. On slide number 10, informational tables at city libraries. I heard you say at Main and Foothills. Are you going to have something at Valentique as well? Do we know?
Mayor, council, over a period of time, our intentions is to have some type of informational table at all the libraries, but it may be within a year or within 2 years, but it'll be ongoing.
Thank you. And one more question. Are we going to have this information also like at the community centers, like at O'Neill Park and across the street from Veteranos Park, where the communities are kind of going to those community centers more often than maybe the libraries or some other safe? Do you have any plan for that?
Mayor and council, we just started this endeavor, but we will take those in consideration to do further outreach efforts to get input for our citizens from all areas.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor. First and foremost, I want to thank the City of Glendale and the council and the prior councils for making sure that ADA is something that is always at the forefront. I know that a lot of times when we go through these processes, we want to look at what needs to be fixed or what is not in compliance, but I have seen a lot of different infrastructure projects that this council has invested in order to ensure that we have more accessibility. So I really appreciate that. One of the things that I will be talking about in the public sessions is sidewalks. Particularly, I'm thinking about a sidewalk that's near 43rd Avenue in Maryland. And it has two huge telephone poles right in the center of them. And so if a senior who or somebody in a mobility device, like a scooter or a wheelchair, was trying to move on the north side of Maryland between 44th Avenue and 43rd Avenue, it's essentially impossible. And so that is something that I've noticed, but I do also want to acknowledge that the city has made the curbs wheelchair accessible and scooter accessible. There's a lot of those in the Cactus District. And I really look forward to getting more residents engaged. And thank you, Councilmember Baldenegro, for that suggestion of getting in the adult centers. I'd also like to suggest that we look at other community organizations that are advocating for our seniors, particularly the folks who came when we discussed ride choice. Those would be really good constituency groups to bring together to have their ideas be part of this plan. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Water meter replacement with advanced metering infrastructure update.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The item that we're going to present today is an update on our water replacement project, and we're replacing that system with advanced metering infrastructure. This is the topics that we'll touch on today. I won't read them, but that's the items that we're going to jump into, so I'll get going. The project goals and objectives, this is a slide that you have seen before, but the purpose is to modernize our metering infrastructure and to improve the customer experience. The way that is accomplished, and I'll point out a few high-level things. One is early leak detection. That is a really important item. So right now, you know, we don't read meters but once a month, and then it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get that data into the system and a bill mailed out. There will be daily information and a customer portal, so customers will know if they have a leak right away. And this is really important for water conservation, especially with, you know, the drought that we've been in for a long time. So saving all the water we can, we think, is a really huge plus for this. Additionally, the customer will have access to their daily usage. They can go in and see hourly usage. They can water their grass and then go see pretty much how much water it took to do that. So it gives our customers some additional tools that they don't currently have. It eliminates manual data entry. Right now, the majority of our meters are manually read. We have people punching in the read that they see. And there are errors in that regard sometimes, so this will help eliminate some of that. And also, in terms of staffing, you know, we're able to reduce travel. We're not driving to every meter every month, so from a sustainability standpoint, there's benefits in that regard as well. Emission reductions from the tailpipe. So those are some of the high-level benefits of this project. And just as a reminder, the current system, which is shown on the left side of this slide, is what we currently have. And 94% of our meters are manually read by a person, you know, driving to their area, getting out, walking a block, taking the lid off, checking the meter, inputting that data. So, you know, we have staff out there constantly that are doing that. 6% of our meters are drive-by meters, and we put those in areas that we think there could be safety issues, like, say, on an arterial street. We don't want somebody driving a city truck, putting their lights on, getting out, taking a meter and get back in. So the drive-by meter, if you're in close proximity to it, we have a device that will automatically capture that read. So we have a you know, small amount of those. What we're moving to is a system where the meters will be replaced, and they'll be replaced with ultrasonic meters. And what that means is the current meters we have are mechanical. So as they get older, they wear and they slow down and they don't capture all the water that is going through the meters. So if you have a really old meter, you're not paying for the full amount of water that you're receiving. These meters, they don't have moving parts in them, so they're supposed to stay accurate through the life of the meter, which we expect to be 18 to 20 years. Additionally, the data is automatically captured through an endpoint, and there's 2 options for capturing data. One is using a radio system where there's antennas and repeaters that are placed throughout the city to capture that data. Or there's a cellular technology which uses existing cell technology that's already in place, and we don't have to add any antennas throughout the city. That's what we have selected to move forward with, is cell technology. So that's what the new system would be.
Mayor? Thank you, Mayor. So our current system, at least the way I understand it, is the water metering, we truncate basically the water use, right? I mean, somebody's not getting billed for every gallon of water. It rolls over to the next month. It truncates by the 1,000 gallons, the nearest 1,000 gallons. Is that right?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, the meters read, I think, in 100-gallon increments. So, and then there's a decimal point, so it'd be down to about 10. So there could be a tiny bit of rounding that would occur from a meter read, but what happens when the meters get old, the water rolls through and it turns like a propeller or something similar to that. And as that wears, it doesn't turn as fast as it should, so it under reads. So this is never captured. It's lost in unaccounted for water. And usually it's at very low flows is where we see that happening on a mechanical meter.
Okay, because from what I understand, what I've read in some of the other cities who've switched over, is one of the issues residents need to understand anyway, is that this is literally measuring every single gallon of water that you're using. And the previous, what we're using now and some of the older technologies, really not doing that. So you're getting billed for the exact amount of water you're using, which can be a surprise to some customers, potentially anyway.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, yeah, what you're saying is correct, but to put it in perspective, if you look overall at what our water loss is, average over 3 years, lost and unaccounted for water, overall, it's in the 5 to 6% range. So overall, it's small. However, even if we weren't doing this system, if we were doing our normal meter replacement and putting a new mechanical meter in, that would still occur. There would be, usually you see an uptick in the read because it's more accurately reading. Did I answer that question?
I think so. And my last question before we move on, the way we're billing, we have basically the lower water users get a better rate than and we have a tiered basically rate system, and that's not changing.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
That's staying the same. Okay, so the schedule for this project is, overall, it's a 3-year project. The first year is a pilot program, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. And then once we're satisfied with the pilot, we would go to full-scale implementation throughout the city, and that would be 2 years to accomplish that. So with respect to the pilot, what the intent is to really test drive this system and make sure that it's working the way it's intended to work before we roll it out wide scale. So we're looking to have about 3,500 accounts that we would use for this pilot. And it's going to be a very diverse mix of accounts. So we want residential, we want commercial, we want all our customer classes represented. We also want every part of the city represented, so they're everywhere to make sure that we're able to read everywhere. And we'd also would like to provide a voluntary opportunity for mayor and council to opt into the pilot if you would like to see how it's actually working. And I believe it would benefit us to get some real data, like is it working, is it not working, are there concerns that you have with it? And we'd also like other Glendale employees that live in Glendale, provide them that opportunity because we feel we could get some real valuable feedback by doing that. So the pilot, as I mentioned, is probably 8 to 12 months to complete. And for the pilot and the full-scale implementation, we're doing robust quality control. So we would like to retain the consultant that has been with us for the feasibility study and the procurement and utilize them to make sure, one, that the contractor's installing the meters properly, that they're doing their workmanship is good. They'll also randomly take meters and verify calibration before they get installed. And then also verify that the data that the meter is registering is going through the cell communication, going to the software communication in the cloud, back into our customer service billing software, that there's no differences there, that it's accurate data. So we would like to do that for both the pilot and for the full-scale implementation. And finally, what I'd like to say, since this project will touch every single one of our customers in the city, communication is very, very critical. And what we have done is we reached out to Sue, Ms. Redding and her team to take the lead on that communications plan. And they've been involved for several months now with this project team to understand what the project is and what they need to do from a communications perspective. So from that standpoint, I'll turn it over to Sue so she can talk about that.
Ron, and Mayor and Council, we are delighted to be able to support and to be there with the Water Department in a successful rollout over the next 3 years. We will be moving in sync and in scale with them, and our communications philosophy for the water meter replacement project is in one word: proactive. By that, we mean that we have everything lined up, we have it ready for resident engagement when they're ready. And we believe that keeping residents informed ahead of time, that's a really simple idea, but it's also a really critical idea to making the rollout smooth and successful. And we also have a communications plan, as Ron alluded to, and we're using clear, consistent language in here. There's nothing overly technical. There are no acronyms when we're speaking to the public. So we were careful to develop a plan with that in mind. And I wanted to give you a flavor for what those in the pilot program are going to be able to see. What you're looking at is actually part of the cover page of our communications plan. So we have created recognizable branding, just like we did with the bond election materials that you may remember. We have a specific color scheme. We have a direct tagline, keeping you informed. And we are showing that we're committed to making sure that at every stage, at every phase, we're keeping them informed and we're keeping them in the know of what is happening and what is going to happen to them, and receiving follow-up and all of that. So that's sort of what you're seeing there. It's a cohesive look to every single thing that they're going to be seeing. We also started a few months ago showing who serves them in the water department. It's not the Glendale Government Water Department that is putting in the meters. These are individuals. And so everyone who gets a paper water bill, they get the Glendale at a Glance paper newsletter, those who opt into that. And anyone who follows our social media, they are seeing individuals now. We started this a few months ago. They're learning about what those jobs are within the water department. We took all of these pictures. That is Nick there at the bottom middle. That is Bart there at the upper top. And Ron, if you switch to the next slide, these are our last 3 Glendale at a Glance newsletters. And you will see, you meet Nick and you hear about his job. And you see Joanne Toms and you hear about her job. And you see Bart and you hear about his job as a water technician. So we're humanizing people in the water department and beginning to show who they are, who they might be seeing, who they might be calling, who is involved in this, who are the champions of this, way before your pilot program even begins, and we're continuing this. I'm pretty excited about who we're featuring for May. So that is a small thing that we are doing. And the other thing I wanted to quickly mention is that our messaging that you will see throughout the years, it is very tailored to the exact stage that the customer is in. As Ron mentioned, there won't be one day where everybody gets their meters. No, there's a pilot, people are being phased in, different people will be at different stages. So our messaging will be with an anticipation mindset, and we call this a resident journey map. And the first stage for people who start going through the process is just beginning to give them awareness and education. One highlight of that, we have many different tools in there. One highlight of that I think will sound familiar to you, which is making a dedicated landing page on our website, a one-stop shop where people can go, and we already have this ready to go. It's in a dark mode. All we have to do is click and make it public. But what we have on there is FAQs. We have resources. We have contact information. We have videos, and a lot more. This may also sound familiar as to what we did with the bond election, with the downtown project, where there's a lot of information. We want to make sure it's successful and residents have a place to go, where the media has a place to go also to get information. We will take the time to develop a landing page, and we have that ready for this project. Okay, skipping to phase 2, that is where we've identified that the individuals are sort of in a pre-installation notification mode. And that, of course, would include direct mailers or door hangers, next door geo-targeted announcements, and so forth. Those are a few highlights. The third would be the actual installation experience. So one of the cool things there is a real-time interactive GIS map that we will have on that landing page. So individuals will be able to go and see, what's happening, when are they coming to me, and so forth. There's also a post-installation stage. So while that's just your big sort of PS to his presentation, and we can certainly dive more into more in future council meetings, we just wanted to let you know that our plan is ready. It is nimble, and we'll be watching all along the way when questions come up or feedback comes up, when things happen within the pilot, and we're ready to add to our plan, switch course, do anything else as it rolls along. So, Ron?
Thank you, Sue. Okay, next steps are, we have a few contracts that will be coming for council consideration at the voting meeting on March 24th. So the first one is the nuts and bolts of this. It's a contract with Badger Meter, and it's for the actual purchase and installation of the meters and lids and everything necessary to get the new meters in the ground, essentially. And that would expire, after 3 years. Once the meters are in the ground, then that contract would be done. We did a second contract with Badger, which is for the Beacon software, and it's for the cell service. So this is a 20-year term. It's a 10-year base and 2 5-year options. So this $10 million is over the 20-year period. So it's, rough math, it's about $500,000 a year. That's to lock in the cell pricing that would be paid and for the software support for that whole 20-year period. And what that does is it will take the data that's on the meter, get it through the cell system into cloud software, and then it'll interface with our current customer billing system and get that data into our system. And so that's what that one is. The third item is the Arcadis contract. So this will be an amendment for $692,000 to bring the total to $1.4 million. And that's for the next 3 years of quality assurance for this project. And then finally, the customer service portal software. We won't be needing that until we get some meters in the ground, but we're negotiating that contract now. We expect to bring it back for council consideration this summer. So those are the next steps. And with that, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
I've got some questions for you. I'm not hearing this. Is this working okay? Okay, good. 2 or 3 questions. My first question is going to be for our city manager. You knew that was coming, right? I know your former employer, there was some issues with water meters there. Is there anything that they're talking about today that we have to be worried about here in Glendale?
Mayor, members of the council, there was a number of issues all occurring at the same time in Gilbert with some substantial capital projects that were underway, putting pressure on rates, some rate increases that had been planned for. And then in the middle of all that, the town of Gilbert had been in a conversion to or transition over to AMI for about the past 5 years and had already had close to 60,000 installed. But there were so many questions about everything that they did bring in an external firm to do an audit and make sure everything is functioning as designed and expected. I have not heard the results of that, but regarding the AMI meters, almost 60,000 were installed by that point and had very, very few issues with any defective units.
Okay. So, Ron, back to you. These meters go in. People should make the assumption that if their meters haven't been 100% accurate, if there's been some seepage, they haven't been billed properly. I think you used a number 3 to 6%, something like that. Should the average person expect a small increase on their water bill because of the new meters?
Mayor, it depends on how old the meter is. A very old meter, yeah, they could expect a higher increase just for normal use because it's properly being captured. The other issue that could come about is somebody may have a small leak that is undetectable with the current meters, but once the new meter comes in and it can detect that low flow, they could become aware of a leak. And even today, we have customers that experience leaks and get a high water bill, and we have a process for addressing that through a leak adjustment. So say, your bill's normally X amount of gallons and now it doubled, and you identify you had a leak, you can contact us and there's a process we can go through. So that would be applicable to this new. Say you get your new meter and now your bill goes way up. You got to figure out where is it leaking, get it fixed, and then we can work to adjust that if it was fixed.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I could add just something to that. Because of the way we're rolling this out and doing the pilot first, that's going to help us identify what does, sort of to your question, what does the average person seeing on on different sizes meters with different ages, what kinds of increases and or decreases, or what kinds of impacts are they going to have? So that'll help us during the pilot to then see, okay, on the greater population, what might some of those impacts be?
Okay, well, and I'm thinking of, a lot of different things. So are we going to be, as a council, forced to have to increase the water bill because of the cost of the new meter? Is that something we're going to be looking at in the near future?
Mayor, no, this project is in our capital improvement program, and we did a cost of service analysis for it. So we will be paying money up front, but there's a payback for it over time. And the payback is about 13 or 14 years, I believe, because that lost water that wasn't getting billed, you get a little bit of that back. And then you save some there's operational savings. You don't have as many vehicles, have less employees, less gas, less fuel. So there are some savings that are realized from the project.
Okay, and you sort of touched on it, but you didn't go into any detail. And the reason I'm asking this question is this just happened to me. Literally, I got my water bill a week ago, I guess it was, over double than normal. Over double the normal. I didn't order extra trash cans or extra bulk pickup or anything. I have nothing leaking, no water spots, no toilets running, virtually nothing. And this happened to me a couple of years ago, and it was 1 month only, and it was well over double of the normal. And so I still haven't identified that. I did not know that there was an opportunity to contact the city and say, hey, something's going on here. So I already mailed my check in. I don't know how we get that worked out, but it wasn't just the water usage. It was well over double the average bill. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know what's going on. We don't have a swimming pool. We don't have an evaporative cooler, any of that stuff. And it's just my wife and I, so really kind of a fluke deal. I don't think that that's typically the meter that does that. I think the meters either don't register, but they don't register more. Is that correct?
Mayor, that's correct.
Yes.
Sorry, Mayor, we'll have someone from customer service and billing reach out, take a look at your bill, and offer you the same type of service we would other residents in that situation.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, so with that, I think that you've answered all my questions. Why don't you put me first on the list for the test? Okay, anyone else?
Mayor.
Go ahead, Ray.
I already sent a text message, but yeah, add me to the list too.
Mayor, you can add me also, but I have a question. On page, I think it's 6, where you talk about the pilot program, approximately 3,500 accounts. I know that you say here it's going to be voluntary. All of the 3,500 accounts are voluntary, or are you doing it in a specific area?
Mayor, Councilmember Guzman, sorry if I misstated that. What I meant was the 3,500 accounts that we're targeting, it's not voluntary to get your meter changed. So we will get a representative amount that's very representative for the whole city as part of the pilot. The opt-in part that's voluntary is for mayor and council to be part of the pilot, or for other city employees that are residents to be part of the pilot, so that we can get good information. But having your meter exchange is not optional ultimately. I mean,
No, I know, but what area?
Everywhere,
Just everywhere?
the whole city.
The whole-
yeah, there will be meters throughout the entire city. So we want to get a representation of meters throughout the
Each-
entire city.
each area,
All
okay.
districts, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Ron, so as I understand it, we change meters out all the time because meters actually do wear out. So the question becomes, and what happens as they head towards wearing out is they don't register an accurate flow, and so therefore citywide we're losing 5 to 6% perhaps in losses. But whether they get a new mechanical meter or they get a new digital meter, they still have the possibility of experiencing that their old meter wasn't accurate, their new one is, and therefore they could have a little bit of sticker shock, right? Doesn't matter which kind of meter we're using. But the advantage to going to the electronic meters is from that point forward, the customer has the opportunity, the advantage of small leaks being detected, also very, which adds to their water bill and also to the loss citywide of precious water. But it also provides them the opportunity to have large leaks distinguished as well. If they have a failure somewhere in their water system that might be flooding out their house or flooding out their yard, we'd get triggered on that right away. Or if they're away on vacation and a vandal breaks a window and sticks a hose in, or just somebody in the neighborhood, I would say kids, but kids aren't always the problem, happens to turn on their water spigot just as a prank, those kinds of things. So they get all these other advantages. And either way, they could get the sticker shock that we talked about. And then the big savings to the community, and I won't say that we'll regain all 5 or 6% of the losses that we're having, but particularly in these water times now, if we regain some of that water loss, and by finding leaks and keeping that from happening, that's good for the city as a whole. Am I on track here?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So when is the pilot going to start?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, if council approves the contract documents in 2 weeks, we would get the project kicked off soon. So there will be some planning. They'll have to purchase meters. So we would anticipate the first meters going into the ground probably June, July, August, sometime this summer. And what we would do is initially get the meters in the ground and probably still manually read it until we get enough in and get the interface worked out to get the data into the system, and then we would turn on the automatic portion of it. So yeah, there's a process, but I would think meters would go in sometime this summer.
Okay, thank you. And then it says the 8 to 12 months to complete. How long is the actual pilot? I mean, each, like if, if you put us in there, how long or is the pilot program going to last once the meter's installed? Somebody, are you going to be monitoring and looking for whatever issues that need to be resolved?
So it's probably going to be, overall from approval to it being finished, a year. So the meters would be in the ground less time than that. But we want to get all of the pilot meters up and running and working well. We want to get the customer service portal installed and there be experience with that from the users of it to make sure that it's working the way that it's intended. And then once the project team is satisfied that it is working well and people in the pilot don't have any concerns, then at that point we would approve it and then it would go into the next phase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to expand on that because in the presentation, like Councilwoman Tomachoff said, it says year 1 pilot program, year 2 and 3 citywide implementation. Because what we're going to be required to do is purchase all of the meters in the first contract. And so my concern is that what if the pilot doesn't work for any reason? And also, I would like to ask the council if we could do an official audit and get a report back to the council about what that audit shows after the 3,500 accounts have been piloted, and giving us more leeway and more time rather than just jumping right into year 2 and year 3. Maybe year 2 needs to be a transition period, but my question to staff is what happens if the council goes through the pilot program, understands that it doesn't work if it doesn't, right? It could also be a huge success. But we've already purchased all of these meters and approved the contracts in 2 weeks from now.
Mayor, members of the council, you would approve the contract, but we will not purchase all the meters at once. We'll start out small with this 3,500 meters or so for the pilot program. And then once we've done what we call like a proof of concept for that, then we'll start purchasing meters as they're ready to be installed. So we're not going to purchase all of the meters up front. We couldn't even store them if we wanted to. And so we'll purchase them along the way as we go, and we'll already have run the pilot program and know the results of that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. This comes like at a really good time. Just last week, I had a situation with a neighbor of mine, and it happened a year before. Same neighbor, same situation. And I think it's nice that we're going to be able to have the residents are going to be able to have the ability, whereas as often as they check social media or their bank account statement and take a quick snapshot of whatever's happening, they'll be able to have that information at their fingertips probably on their smartphone to check water usage, water flow, and things like that, so that they're not having that surprise happening. I mean, and again, thank you again, Ron and Levi, for helping me out with the situation. And again, this is really, really good news. I know there's going to be a lot of people probably volunteering to get that in their houses, so you may get more than just the council asking for that. Thank you, Ron.
Before I go there, Ron, one other question. Is there anything in the electronic portion of it that if something is awry, is not normal, that it automatically sets an alarm off to the customer? Or is the customer solely responsible to check that every day to see if they have a leak?
Mayor, the customer service portal will have all the data, and it can be set up to automatically notify the customer of a leak. And
that's all I needed to know right there.
But the customer has to opt in and request that.
Okay,
We don't want to just do it without their permission.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Part of my question was on that too. So if they do have the leak, you said it automatically notifies them, but what if they're not looking at the website on a regular basis? Will it send it to their phone? It will, okay.
Yeah, Mayor, council member.
The other thing, which I'm sure is going to happen because it's catching all of the water if there are any leaks, you get people that their bill is, 2 times, 3 times what they're normally used to paying, and you're going to get a phone call, and it's not going to be a happy one. What is the water department going to do about that? How are you going to handle it?
Blame you.
Hey, I've had a large water leak once, so I know what it feels like.
Mayor, Councilmember Guzman, the way that this typically works, because it happens quite a bit. So if we're notified, we, along with customer service, Levi's group, we will look at what their historical use has been. What was it the last couple of months? What was it last year during that month? And if there's a good spike, we will investigate. We'll talk to the customer. If they say they can't find a leak, like in this particular case that Councilmember Baldenegro brought up, we're sending our staff out to the house that has the high water bill to help identify, to see if they can identify where there may be a leak. And if it is identified and they fix it, then there's a process where we can adjust their bill for that month to get it back to what it normally was. So that's kind of generally how the process works.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor. Have there been any other municipalities aside from the case in Gilbert that has installed the digital water meters? in the valley?
There, Councilmember Conchas, yes, there's been several cities, I believe Mesa, Tempe, like Prescott, Yuma. It's pretty widespread, and I think there's several other cities that are evaluating going in the same direction.
Thank you.
All right. What do you need from us?
Information only, don't need anything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Council item of special interest, service line warranty program.
All right, I'm back again. This item is to consider a council item of special interest for service line protection program. This item was requested by Councilmember Turner. And what it is the option of entering into a partnership with a private water and sewer protection line provider. And what I wanted to do with this little figure on the screen is just point out what it would really do. So one, if you see this dashed vertical line, if you consider that the right-of-way or property line to a typical household, in the right-of-way, in the street or alley, we have a water main, and then we have a service line that goes to a meter, which is about at the property line. And that portion of the line is the responsibility of us, the city, to maintain and keep in good shape. From the water meter, lost my cursor, sorry. From the water meter to the house, it is the homeowner or the property owner's responsibility for that portion of the water line. So if that failed, they would be responsible to fix it. On the sewer side, which is this red line, we have the same thing. Our sewer main is out in the street, and then the sewer line is one continuous line that goes up to the house. So if it's a little bit different, if there's a blockage in this line, the property owner is responsible to clear the line all the way to our main. If there's an issue in our main, we would go and clear that. However, if for some reason there was a break in the line or roots damaged the line where it had to be repaired, if it's in the right-of-way, we would fix it with our crews. If it's not in the right-of-way, it would be the property owner's responsibility to repair that. What these service companies do is they provide pretty much insurance for the customer's portion of these two lines. And the partnership is essentially allowing them to use the city's logo in their mailings. So we would pick one of these vendors, there's multiple, and the partnership would allow them to use our logo for the mailings to get customers to sign up. So the scope of this is just to gather information for council to make a decision if they want to enter one of these partnerships or not. So we would find out who's doing it, what are the terms and conditions, what companies are out there, and bring that data back. We think it'll take about 40 to 50 hours of staff time to complete it. And with that, would just like to know if there's consensus to do this.
Yeah, I have a question. The people that sell these are at pretty much every, whether it's league or conference of mayors or any of the legislative stuff, they're at every one of those promoting it. I know a few years ago, we brought this up and the council at that time decided not to do it. I don't know how many years ago that was. I still feel the same way I did then. It's something, I don't want the city's logo personally on a private entity's, because I think it potentially could hurt us. That's just my feeling. Myself, I've got insurance, and if my insurance doesn't cover it, then I understand that it's my responsibility. I just don't like the idea of sharing our logo, our identity with a private business. That's my personal. But we'll open it up. Anybody's got any comments or questions? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just like to ask the council, well, point out that today's not a decision point necessarily. It's to give staff the opportunity to do the research. Many other cities, cities our size and larger, and probably smaller too, including here in the Valley, Phoenix, out of the Valley, Las Vegas, and others, do offer this program to their residents. We do share our logo with lots of outside entities when we sponsor a special event that isn't really put on by our special event department. In fact, if somebody else is coming in and doing that, but we're a sponsor of it, we share our logo. It's not our city seal; it's the city logo. Now there are advantages to getting this kind of coverage through the city as a group. Lower rates and other benefits. There's also a potential of part of this premium becoming discretionary to the council is how we might want to spend that. We don't have to, we could say just buy down the rate, or we could take part of that and set up a fund to help maybe low-income families to get their water mains and sewer mains repaired. We could put it to other good uses if we want to. All of that's the kind of thing that staff would find out and present logically for us. I would like to point out too that there are a number of these programs available across the country. National League of Cities has just recently endorsed one specifically. Many of us, if not all of us, will be at the National League of Cities conference next week. I'm sure all of these companies will be present in the exhibition hall, so we have the opportunity to go by and visit any of them, get our questions answered, compare anything like that we'd like to do. It just seemed to me like this would be good timing to go ahead and say, this is something we'd like to look at. I will say too that for most residents, replacing the water service, the freshwater service to their house, may not be overly expensive. Now, the water loss that occurs on that freshwater line could be very expensive to them. But then on the other side of the house, where the sewer line exits, those kind of repairs are very expensive, and we have so many residents that are in older neighborhoods where the material used was maybe best at that time, but would certainly be considered substandard now. And if they have a problem, getting that replaced is very expensive for them. And so being part of a program like this, and also I would guess that if it's a citywide program, that the customer service is going to be at a higher level than if it's just one-off contracts that residents might have with a provider, or potentially, I guess, through a homeowner's insurance. If it's not all homeowners insurance companies offer this coverage, but by being part of a group, I think they might also get better customer service. I don't have a dog in the fight. I know if it was available, I would sign up for it, and I know that I've had residents talk to me about particularly the cost of replacing their sewer line when that goes bad. So I'd just like the council to consider it and give a yes to the learning more about it. That's all I'm asking at this point, is that we learn more about it. Thank you.
One other question. Ron, I don't know if you're real familiar with this, or maybe Vicky might be the better. Isn't this program set up where the city has to collect the funds and then remit them to the insurance company?
Mayor, members of the council, yes. Generally speaking, this, when these cities enter into these types of agreements or partnerships, the billing for the insurance, because this is actually a form of insurance, appears on the city's water bill, and then the city, in some cases, may take a portion of it. Well, in most cases, would take a portion of it, because we have to have something for doing the job of putting it on the bill, and then we'd remit the remainder to the insurance company. That's generally how they work.
All right. I was thinking there was another part, there was something else that I didn't particularly care for, at any rate. So I'm not in favor of it myself, but I'd open it up. You have a question?
Yeah, well, I just want, so we basically handle the billing for I know there's a variety of vendors. I know the National League of Cities had one previous company that they had a partnership with, and I don't know whether they've increased that now from 1 to 2, or they've got a new person. I'm not exactly sure where that stands, but I'd be interested to know, like, we're required to manage the billing on these.
Mayor, members of the council, that, again, that's generally how it happens. I haven't seen a different model. It's possible there is one, but generally it appears on the customer's bill, and then they pay their bill, and then we remit whatever portion of it we've agreed to remit to the insurance company. If it were not for that, and I'll say the convenience of that, a customer can go obtain insurance for their own water line somewhere else. The purpose of these programs is to make it convenient for the customer. What can occur, and I've seen occur in other entities, is the customer now believes that was the city's, they paid the city, and if the insurance company denies the claim or there's some dispute, customers will often bring that dispute thinking, well, it's the city I paid, not understanding that, well, actually, it was on your bill, but it was paid to a third party and not to us.
Thank you.
That can cause some confusion.
Okay, so, but is there an option for people to participate in these programs without the city participating?
Mayor.
Like resident direct to whatever the company is?
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Tomatroff, under these types of programs, this is generally how it works. If we want to continue this, we can do some more research on that. I don't know the answer to that
Okay, that's
question.
kind of how I feel, because I'm not exactly sure I have a good understanding of how it would work, whether, and then is it an opt-in, whether people want to opt in or don't have to opt in, and whether or not we, do a good job of letting people know if they're able just to go directly to the company, letting them know that these services are available. I'd like to have more information just before I say yes or no. I'm not exactly sure I have a clear understanding of how this works.
Mayor, members of council, it's definitely an opt-in. I can answer that part of the question. We would not automatically put it on anyone's bill. It's definitely an opt-in.
Yeah, let me offer a suggestion, just in all fairness to Councilmember Turner. As he stated, next week, I think most all of you, if not all of you, are going to a conference where this will be available. Do your homework up there, and then when we come back, let's find out if we want them to spend 40, 50 hours to research it. At that point, everybody will have a lot better idea. We have a much more thorough understanding of how it works. Does that sound okay with everybody? I don't know if 2 weeks makes any difference, does it?
No.
Okay. So, I'm looking for some feedback. Go ahead.
I wanted to give some comments, Mayor, so is that okay? All right, thank you. Yeah, so of course, I had some issues with my sewer line that wasn't covered. And this isn't about me, it's about Yoli. I learned after that experience that Yoli was not, didn't have running water in her house, a resident of mine, for 2 weeks, and that she was going to her daughter's house to shower and to use the facilities and to use the restroom. And so I can see this as, if we do give consensus to get more information, answer all these questions, to see how it would benefit the residents who are in lower socioeconomic tiers in our communities, who cannot finance tens of thousands of dollars to fix their sewer line. And I, tailor it back to our mission, which is to improve the lives of the people that we serve every day. If this could help one person to make sure that they have running water and a sewer line and a water line, I think that we should at least consider it. And obviously we're not making a decision right now, but I would ask the council that if it just helps one person in Glendale, that we should at least be open to giving consensus today for staff to review it. Thank you.
And just so, I think you understand it, but they have to opt into the program, and then they have to pay a higher water bill to cover the insurance before they could ever claim it. So I don't know if that helps them or doesn't help them. My suggestion is, let's put it off for 2 weeks. Do your homework when you're in DC. Find out these programs, how they work, to figure out whether we want to have them go another 40, 50 hours of labor to come back and make a recommendation. You guys come back and you go, hey, let's do it. Well, they don't even have to do that. Yeah. I understand. We'll still have a meeting anyway.
And Mayor, If I could just say one thing in response, I'm okay with that, but I think that this council proposed a rule that we cannot bring up another item for another year. So would we make an exception for this one?
My suggestion is that we table this for a couple weeks, so everybody has got a much more thorough understanding, and we don't have to wait as long for them to do their investigating.
Okay, Mayor. Thank you.
That would be my suggestion. I'm not saying no or yeah. I'm just saying, everybody do your research. And you're going to be in a position that's going to have the people there ready to go.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just to clarify, though, because Councilmember Conchas was referring to somebody not being able to take showers in their home, this literally is only for sewer lines.
No.
This has
No, it's water and
This is for
sewer.
water
Fresh
and
water and
sewer. Oh, okay. All right. I mean, the older infrastructure tends to fall in areas where there's, retired people on fixed incomes who this would really present a real hardship for. So, but I mean, I just don't have enough information. I don't know what the name of the vendor is. I wouldn't know who to look for we'd have to be able to, 'cause if you could provide that information to us before we go, so that I'm happy to go try to find these people in the vendor hall and get more information, but I need to know who to look for. So if you provide that information for us, I'd be happy to do it that way, but I'm gonna need to know who to go talk to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've had residents specifically come to me and ask why we don't have this kind of a program in the city. And I know I could have used it a couple of times in the past. And so I don't have a problem moving forward, with, having us have a study on it. I've talked to several of these vendors at the league in the past, and at the time, we actually, I think I was here when we discussed it previously, where we said, no, we don't want to move it forward. But I would like to kind of see where we're at today as far as, having some information brought to us. So whether we decide that today or put it off for a couple of weeks, either way is good for me. But I would probably support at least having staff look into this and decide if we want to move it forward. I would like to make sure that our costs are covered, whatever that process is. That would be the number one concern for me. And if there's a way to, help out the residents and give them the opt-in or opt-out, type of thing, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I also don't have a problem with giving my consensus to go ahead and have the staff look into this. Also, like Councilmember Tomachoff, I don't know who to go and talk to over there. I looked at the schedule. I don't remember seeing anything about water, but okay. But yeah, I don't have an issue with going through and having staff look into it. I myself have had issues with it myself also.
Well, I just want to make sure, so are we giving consensus? And now that I think about it, I think the big vendor hall exhibits are at the city summit and not at the Congressional City Conference. So we're not, I don't know whether or not we'd be likely to find this person because they don't do that at the Congressional Cities Conference, do they? Who knows the answer to that question? But I get the impression that we're giving consensus to go ahead and staff to go ahead and do the research anyway, so I'm fine with that. Because I don't really have enough information on, whether our costs are going to be covered and all of that sort of thing. But I mean, we can still go talk to them if they are there, but they don't have a big vendor hall like they do because it's not really at a convention center where they normally would have the city summit. So I don't recall it being the same at Congressional City Conference. Thank you.
Negro.
I'm not going next week, so you guys will be looking through the halls all the time. I think sometimes we shoot things down because we make decisions that there's too much time invested to gather information, things like that. In my opinion, we have to invest time and effort through the city to do what's right to the residents and everything else. I think this is one of those where it could greatly benefit residents and businesses, and if they opt into it or not. My concern would be that and we all have been witness to this, where if our logo or something is on with anything, they think that the city is paying for everything. I want to make sure that we have something in effect where they completely understand what's happening, what's going on. They completely understand how to read what's the information given to them every month, things like that, so we don't run into those situations where if a claim gets denied and then they say, well, no, the city's paying for this. Well, no, it's not. That would be one of my concerns. Just an information gathering thing. I'm okay with that. I hope you guys find those vendors next week and talk to the pros and ask a lot of questions. Ask while they're there, what are your competitors here? Because we want to talk to them too, and gather information. I think it's a reasonable investment of time to gather information for us, and that could really benefit the residents. So I'm okay with them looking into this. And then also, Mr. Turner leading the charge next week and looking for those vendors in Washington.
What else you need?
That's it. Thank you.
Next.
Council item of special interest, performance-based contracts.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Here today to give you an update on our performance-based contracts. As background, this was requested by the mayor on November 25th. He requested a status update. So this is a little bit different than the standard council item of special interest. Today we're in front of you with information only. We're not asking for consensus. And because it's information only, we just proceeded and are doing this report. We could have also done this via memo, but we opted to bring it in front of council just to give you an update on our performance-based contracts. So as a reminder, we started this process in 2019, just discussing what a performance-based contract is, what it might look like. And in the end, we ended up signing contracts, council-approved contracts on September 26, 2023 with McKinstry Accession and Midstate Energy. We did subsequently amend the Midstate Energy contract to change the name to Verigy West LLC. So we're here to talk to you today just about the status of these contracts or these construction projects. Very pleased to have with me today Sonia Sarmiento. She is our CIP administrator in field operations. It's her and her team that's really done the bulk of the work on this, and I'm happy that she's here with me today to help give you an update on the status of these projects.
Thank you, Ms. Botenko. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Once these contracts were established, we were able to focus on the execution. And we were given 25 projects over 15 different locations. And if we take an average of all these locations, we're 97% complete. While these projects varied in scope and size, they can all be categorized into 4 different project types. We have our HVAC or mechanical upgrades, our interior and exterior LED lighting upgrades, as well as our solar PV array installations. For our mechanical upgrades, these are 2 of the 4 projects. We have Main Library and FRAC. For Main Library, that is a picture of our air-cooled chillers being installed. And I want to highlight that because they used to be water-cooled chillers. What that means is we're no longer using water to release the heat from this building. And this system is comparable to what you see at the new City Hall building. For FRAC, we replaced the chillers and the pumps. That's more of a like-for-like replacement. And we also included some new equipment there. Here's a summary of the mechanical upgrades. As you can see, the Adult Center and Foothills Library are 100% complete. The 5% at FRAC represents the commissioning for a fan coil unit that we still have to do. And the 20% for Main Library is for a punch list item for one of the chillers as well as the controls. I want to mention the controls because that's a unique part of this project. In the past, our technicians would have to physically be on site for us to adjust the temperatures. And once these controls are in place, we'll be able to do so remotely. And so it's not just an efficiency on the maintenance side of things, it's also going to benefit the staff and the patrons that are in that library. For interior LED lighting upgrades, we had the opportunity to update 11 different sites. And when we approached these projects, we wanted to make sure we kept the functionality and the user in mind. So for Fire Station 151, the type of lighting we used in that interior truck bay area varies significantly from the lights that are directly above us here at the Civic Center. We also had some lights at the Adult Center. We focused on the first floor there, and this is just an example of the corridor lighting that we had. For Gripstick, we touched various sites, but for the main building, there are many spaces in that building. So we had to do our computer labs, our conference room, obviously some office spaces, but also the classroom that you see in this picture. For interior LED lighting upgrades, we are 100% done on the majority of the projects. The only exception is Foothills Library. That 5% represents some lighting in our lobby area. For exterior LED lighting upgrades, we focus on parks, and for Grand Canal Linear Park, the lights that we chose for the underpass is specifically a brighter white color to improve visibility for our park rangers and our public safety personnel. Northern Horizon Park is a good example of how we directed the light towards the center of the park and kind of highlighted the pathways so that the light didn't bleed into the surrounding neighborhoods. For our exterior LED lighting upgrades, three of the 6 projects are 100% complete. The ones that are pending are Grand Canal Linear Park. That 10% represents some poles that had to be reordered. For Lions Park, the 5% missing there is for backfilling the trench. And for O'Neill Park, the 15% that is pending is for the SES and the solar poles, which were long lead items. The solar PV array installations, we had 4 projects at 2 sites. That's FRAC and Gripstick. And FRAC is a facility that stands out to me just because it had multiple upgrades. We had our mechanical upgrades, our interior upgrades, lighting upgrades, and solar. And not only will these PV arrays generate energy that will help power the building, they also have the added benefit of providing shaded parking for our residents. At Gripstick, the West Carport is only one of 3 different projects at Gripstick. We had the north and south ground-mounted arrays as well. And we are very close to reaching the finish line for our solar PV array installations. That 2% represents an issue with the breaker that we need to address at FRAC, but other than that, we are 100% complete. And with that, are there any questions?
Questions? Anybody? No, this is awesome. I guess my one question would be is, have you got any idea of the amount of savings that we've realized by making a lot of these changes?
So Mayor and Council, when we entered into the contracts, we committed to you, we would come back and discuss savings. We can talk, this light saves us this much, but it's not holistic yet. And we really want to come back and talk to you about not just the true energy savings, and true energy savings is hard. So we have to look at when the actual upgrade was done and how has our utility rate changed over that time frame too. So we're comparing apples to apples. So, and we have to look in what's the maintenance cost we're saving, because all these lights here are new. These lights have a longer life than the prior lights did. So we're going to see maintenance savings too. So we're going to come back and talk to you about that. One thing Sonia did mention, and I want her to highlight this, the water saving at the main library is real. And so can you mention the savings?
Sure. Yes, Mayor and Council. The water savings for the transition from water-cooled to air-cooled, we're seeing in 2021, we spent 2.2 million gallons of water, and in 2025, we had 279,000 gallons of water.
So, and go ahead. That's the stuff that I think everybody wants to hear. I was sitting here as you were talking, and I'm thinking to myself, one of the very first things that the majority of this council approved many, many, many years ago was the LED street lights. We knew that we were going to save money, basically make money, but some of those LED lights now are starting to show their age, and I'm starting to see a few of them starting to go out. But, it's real, and it's something I think our citizens need to know, which is why I asked for this, is You guys, excuse me, you guys aren't tooting your own horns enough. So, got a question?
Thank you, Mayor. So when this was presented, first of all, I don't know, for the sake of some who were not on the council when we did these performance-based contracts, and for the public, you might maybe, in a very brief description of what a performance-based contract is, because not everybody watching the workshop may understand what a performance-based contract is, and I don't know, some of the council members are new to what a performance-based contract is. And then secondly, when these were brought to us, we were actually given real projections, ROI projections on these. And so if there's going to be adjustments to, I think that's what you're saying, Ms. Montenko, is that we're going to need to adjust our return on investment projections. I mean, because it's going to take time to recover the investment, obviously. I mean, we're not going to be able to save the money, all of the savings were over a period of years, but if we need to adjust that based on other costs of completing the projects or whatever the costs were, I'd like to see that brought back to us so we have a better understanding of what that is.
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Tomshoff, thank you. So performance-based contracts are those that, where you will see energy savings on the contract by doing these upgrades, and your utility bill should drop, and therefore you should be able to pay the capital cost of upgrading. We did not enter into true performance-based contracts. We worked it out with budget and finance, where we entered into construction agreements for these. So these projects are not being paid for by the savings. What staff did commit, though, is we were going to come back and we will discuss with you the savings we're seeing. So the second part of your question there, Councilmember Tomlchoff, is I'm not qualifying our savings we're seeing to date. What I'm saying is that we hadn't anticipated the amount of rate increases on the utility side that we've seen to date. And so I think the dollar amount we're saving is going to be higher than what we initially projected, but I actually want to come back and say, we thought this amount of kilowatt hours we would save, the actual energy usage, and show you that as well as the dollars saved. So we started discussing performance-based contracts. What could we do to our buildings to replace or upgrade infrastructure that would actually save us money? But in the end, we entered it so we don't have guarantees built into the contract. We opted to do construction agreements with these vendors instead of paying them to verify the performance. And so what we're working on internally is, what are we seeing for savings, and then working with our organizational performance departments such that they can help us verify the savings.
Mayor, if I could ask a question, then this is unless I missed something, this is the first time hearing that these weren't performance-based contracts. Were we notified that we had changed what we were going to do with these, or?
Mayor, members of the council, when Michelle is talking about them not being true performance-based contracts, what that means in terms of budget and finance is we didn't use the contractor to finance these. These were financed with regular city funds, bonds, other mechanisms. Some of them were financed with cash. So we used our own financing. That doesn't mean in the sense that there aren't performance-based savings that are associated with them. It just means we didn't use their firm to finance these. And so they technically are not performance-based, where we financed them through that company, and now the company is telling us how much money we saved from the contracts, and they're applying that to our capital cost in a financing type of mechanism. So again, it doesn't mean that we're not reaping those savings or that we're not getting those savings. In fact, we believe from a budget and finance perspective, our savings is greater because our borrowing rate to do them is much less than it would have been had we used those companies to finance them. So we used our own bonds and our own financing mechanisms, which allowed us to borrow at a lower rate and get the same savings without paying the interest cost to the contractor.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I'm just saying that, I wasn't aware that we had changed how we were financing. This is the first time hearing about it, that we thought we were doing this. We had the whole presentation about the performance-based contracts multiple times, I think, when that we thought that that's what we were doing. And I understand the more favorable financing terms, but one of the things of using our own bonds is that we only have so much capacity also. So we're using up capacity, bond authority, and I know we only have the ability to manage a certain number of projects at a certain time, but that was presented to us as one of the advantages of using a true performance-based contract, was it freed up the bond authority for other projects so that we can manage our secondary property tax, because we have the resolution where we don't go out to bond if we're going to increase the secondary property tax. So I don't think, these weren't enterprise projects, I don't think any of them were they. So they literally would have been regular facilities bonds and things like that. So I'm just saying that I wasn't aware of it, and it wasn't really what was presented to us is how we ended up doing it. In the end of the day, I'm glad we saved money, but in the future, I'd like to be informed if there's changes in something like that. Even a memo would be helpful. Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. My memory and recollection tracks with Councilmember Tomachoff's. It's a little disturbing to find out now that the way in which the contract was actually administered was different than what we'd authorized. It does consume bond capacity that may have been used otherwise, but it also consumes cash on hand that could have been used otherwise, or that maybe we weren't even made aware existed to that degree, because I think that was one of the points of the demonstration, is that we could do more given our financial condition at that time. So some of my concerns at the time were whether the companies we were choosing were going to have the capacity to do the projects, and it looks like with the 100%, 95% type completions that we've seen here, that has proven to be a possibility for them, and I'm good with that. I was also concerned about the selection process, but that's water under the bridge at this point. My current concern is that when I look at these pictures of the Grand Canal and the Northern Horizon Park, and I compare them to the result that I've observed at Saguaro Ranch Park, I see differences, and I'm concerned that at Saguaro Ranch Park, where the fixtures were replaced, that the fixtures that we now have are not of at least the aesthetic quality, and perhaps not of the functional quality of what we originally had. In that park, we had the attractive gas lamp looking lights like we have in downtown, and now we've gone to what looked like, to me, bottom of the barrel fixtures. And so that's one concern I have. I would have thought that we would try to do like for like, and then the other concern I have, and this persists and is perhaps something that we can address, is the light quality. And I've brought that up many times over the course of the time I've been on council. The Kelvin rating of the lights are different, and I thought that in our historic areas we were going to work to opt for a warmer light rather than the very bright cold light like we would have in an interior space. Yet at Saguaro Ranch Park, it appears that all of that is the coldest bright white possible, certainly not the warm yellow tinged light that we have. And I also see it happening in downtown Glendale with replacements, that rather than replace them with the same visual quality of light that they're replacing, they're going in with the bright ones. And I don't know if that's just failing to pay attention to detail or some other plan, but those things concern me. Thank you.
Mayor? If I can, I'd like to circle back, because the more I think about it, the more concerned I'm becoming about this. And I understand staff is doing as they're directed. So this isn't specifically directed at you guys, but I just want to make sure I understand what exactly happened. Because so we did contracts with these Mid-State and are now Verigy West and McKinstry, but these were not, were they basically sole source procurements then? We didn't go out to RFP, we just awarded these contracts till we thought we were doing performance-based contracts, basically because they were going to be financing the project, and that's what was brought to the council and that's what was approved. But instead, these were just, contracts were just awarded as regular construction contracts with these companies. Do I understand that correctly?
Mayor, members of the council, I think what would be helpful, or what would be best, is if you would allow me the opportunity, excuse me, to go back and look specifically at the procurements. I don't recall if they were done as, I just don't recall. all the contracts, to my recollection, did come to the council. And in them, they would have identified the funding sources, as well as the budget identified the funding sources. But I can go back, work with my staff, and put that all together for you. It's very hard for me to recall all of these things off the top of my head and give you a comprehensive answer. So if you'll allow me that, then I'll take the time to put that together, either in a report or come back at another workshop and let you know exactly for each contract how that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that it wasn't a competitive bidding process. If it was literally just issued contracts, awarded contracts, that's what my concern is, not necessarily, and I understand, I mean, we're just now recently put those charts back in where we can see, you know, how much was spent on the project and whether, what the amount was budgeted and what the cumulative total of the project is. But these were my first, what I thought were the first time I'd ever worked with performance-based contracts. So to me, it wasn't really clear what the reporting on those and how those staff reports and what that was going to look like. But my concern would be that we were literally issuing non-competitive, without a competitive bidding process, issuing these contracts to this without the council being aware of that. That's what my concern is. Thank you.
Mr. Boldonegro.
In response to Councilman Turner's comment about the light in downtown specifically, I know I've spoke with a lot of the business owners downtown, and they like the look of the older antique kind of post, but they do not like the softer glow. They want a brighter white light with the look of the old style lamp posts. They like the brighter white light. So I've had long conversations, and many of them with the business owners downtown and people walking by. They do like the brighter white light. They do like the aesthetics of the old lamp post, yes, but they prefer that brighter white light. So if that's part of the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. And for the benefit of the council members that weren't on council at the time we entered into these agreements, and for any of the public that might be watching that would be curious, one of the issues that I had, and I believe Councilmember Tomachev also had, is that with the McKinstry contract, a key player in that contract was the stepson of our former city manager. That wasn't revealed to us at the time, and I think was actually an attempt to hide the role that individual, that family member played. And that put us all, several of us on edge, and we paid particularly close attention to how this was playing out at the time. And then to find out that maybe those terms that we thought we were in have changed, and all it is just more concerning. So, thank you.
Done?
Yep. So thank you.
Thank you. And you'll bring that back to us in the future. Vicki?
Mayor, members of the council, I believe, again, yes, I will bring that back to you, but having thought about it and with some additional information, I believe these were procured via linking agreements. But I'll put that all together for you with what the financing sources were and such, and get it back to you.
Thank you. Julie?
Council item of special interest, code cases submitted by an individual.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. We're here today to talk about Councilmember Tomalchev's council item of special interest regarding the number of cases any single individual in our community can submit to code for code violations. And as a reminder, I think this came up, one of the constituents of the Cholla district was having some problems with bulk trash and felt that they were only allowed to submit 2 bulk trash complaints per week. So in speaking with that constituent and clearing that mistake up, you can submit as many Glendale 1 requests as you feel you need to all other departments other than code. Code is the only one that's had a restriction in Glendale 1 from the very beginning. Why that restriction was implemented in Glendale 1 from the beginning is before my history of supervising the code division, so I'm not quite sure why there was a limit attached originally, but that limit was changed in, we'll see in a timeline here, I believe it was 2023, and it was reduced to 2 complaints per week per single individual in the community. And so this is kind of a continuing conversation along those lines. We're here today to present some historical data on the code division, to include their staffing numbers, their proactive work versus their reactive work, case management system changes, and then finally some functionality changes. So code looks today a little bit different in function, and as far as what they do for the city, looks a little different today than it did back in, say, 2019. But when we're looking at the data, when we're looking at the reactive versus proactive caseloads, and what we're trying to accomplish is an 80% proactive rate. So only 20% of our cases actually come from the community. We're aware of 80% or more of the violations that exist in the community, and we're actively working those violations without having to have someone in the community tell us about the complaint. We already know about it. So we were at a conference, your former code official, Tim, and I were at a conference about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. It was right here at the Renaissance in downtown Glendale. And there was an agency sitting at our conference table. So we were on the rounds with 10 seats. And there was another agency sitting with us from, I believe they were from Maine. So different circumstance for sure. But they said they were 99% proactive. That 99% of what the community turned into them as complaints, they were already working active cases. And so that became the conversation for Mr. Bowling and I, for Ms. Jefferson. I should have introduced, I apologize. Sitting next to me is your code official, Tasha Jefferson. She's going to assist with some of the conversation today. She's been in the code division at different levels and truly understands some of the history and why things have happened the way they have. So I think her insights will be very beneficial. But going back to that conference, Tim and I looked at each other and said, that's where we should be. We should be serving the community at a level where 99% of what they turn into us, we're already aware, we're already working an active case, and we're already trying to get enforcement on whatever violations occur. So that's kind of been our charge. It's what we've been trying to do over the last several years. And this data will hopefully help us walk through, again, just some of the history and then where we are today. And Tasha can speak a little bit about where we hope to be next year, the year after, following year, on down the line. So skipping to the next slide, which I thought I could do by clicking that button. Oh. So staffing structure changes. In 2019, you'll see that code had 18 team members, 14 of whom were inspectors in the field. We had 2 supervisors, a code official, and admin support person that worked in the office, but we had 14 inspectors. Looking at the budget book, you'll see in 2021, it looks like we were reduced to 17 personnel. I can't explain why the budget book looks different than our internal records, except that one of the positions within the code division was a part-time position. And my recollection is something happened in that 2020-2021 period that part-time positions were eliminated in certain areas. And I believe that change had to do with available full benefits for part-time employees. So there was a cost increase for part-time employees because we now had to make available to them these benefits. Now, I spoke to Mr. Gibson, your budget and finance director. Neither of us can recall exactly when that rule came into place and if that truly was the reason for this. In speaking with Ms. Jefferson, our records indicate that we were not reduced by that position through that entire year, which is my recollection. I think we lost my personal recollection, I could be wrong. I think we lost the position for a brief period of time, figured out the funding for the position and how we could make it work with council support, and then brought that position back fairly quickly. So the actual budget book reflects 17. Reality, for most of that year, or fiscal year, we had 18, same as 2019. And then the council made some significant increases in code staffing over a couple of fiscal years. And in fiscal year 23, you added 3 code inspectors, which allowed us to increase the number of grids that we had per inspector, thereby it's reducing the size of the grid, making it easier for an inspector to work within that grid and get to more properties. And then in 2024, we added another supervisor and a senior inspector. So that raised our levels, according to the budget book, to 24. But again, I'll go back and say our internal records suggest we are 25 and have been 25 since 2023.
Mayor, Mayor. It's often said on the dais here that new council members don't know what happened in the past, which is true because of 2020. Can you talk to us a little bit more about why code moved from development services to a division in the city manager's office?
Mayor, Councilmember Conchas, yes, absolutely. So I took over the code division in early 2020. And I had, in my tenure as the police chief, I had a relationship with the code official and had conversations about where they were positioned within the city and why it was kind of a slippery slope for them to be located in development services. So if you think about it, the code division is responsible for going out and enforcing when people are, say, building without a permit or committing some other violations of the UDC, and then we were sending them to the planning division within development services, and they were forced to pay fees for permits, for inspections, for things like that. And it just felt like, should the enforcement piece be attached to the piece that's gaining revenue on behalf of the city from the constituent who was found to be in violation of something? And we just kind of felt, well, maybe we should keep those separate. So keep the enforcement on the public safety enforcement side of the house and leave the ability to work with the constituent and get them where they need to be so they're no longer in violation to the planning division within development services. So in talking with Mr. Phelps, who was our city manager at the time, originally I don't think he liked the idea, but I just kept going after him, and then eventually the decision was made to move code under the city manager's office. So some code system changes. Back in 2019, we're on a legacy system called Hanson. Development Services is still on that system today, and they're making strides to get off of that system. It's an outdated system. It's no longer supported. It's incredibly difficult to pull any statistical reports from that system. And I should mention that this PowerPoint presentation was in large part put together by Ms. Jefferson and Jenny Durda from Work Performance and her team, one of whom is in the room today, Stephen Gershew. And they do a phenomenal job of pulling out real data and trying to understand the data in a way that makes sense and can be presented. And so when I tell you Hanson is a difficult product to work with when it comes to data, that's not Rick St. John telling you that. That's the team of people that do this for a living saying that system doesn't work well. And so I have to believe it's true. And so Glendale 1 was implemented in 2020. But we, and code moved to Glendale 1 for case management, but for whatever reason, I don't remember why, I don't know what the logic was, we didn't move our proactive cases over to Glendale 1 until a year later in 2021. So starting, I'd say in 2022, the data that we're looking at is reliable, verifiable, and can be supported by the systems that we're now pulling information from. Anything prior to 2022, we have some reliability concerns, number one. And number two, there's the COVID effect. So when you go into 2020 and 2021, things looked a little bit different citywide in all our departments because of COVID and the impacts of COVID. And that certainly bled into 2021. But by 2022, I think we'd hit a new normal. And we can now look at the data from 22 to 25 and say, okay, we're as best we can comparing apples to apples when we look at that information. Let's see, 2023, senior inspectors added SmartGov. So SmartGov is your business tax and license software system. And on the next slide, you'll see the reason we added that as a tool in their tool belt was because they now, and had been at that time, they go out and they do inspections on new businesses or existing businesses to ensure that they have proper licensing and that they're remitting taxes to the city. In our first year, I don't know if the statistic is on here, but in the first year, we recovered a sizable amount of revenue, enough so that this current budget cycle, we talked about adding another inspector or senior inspector to the code division to just work on business licensing. And I'm not quite sure we're there yet. So I'd like to give it another year, maybe two, under its current operation to truly understand what revenues can we pull in through this kind of mini program within the code division. In 2024, we moved our proactive cases to a system called Clarity. We called it Build Glendale. This was a system that we went to when SmartGov, which was originally supposed to be the solution for development services code, fire marshal, building safety, tax and license. It was supposed to be a comprehensive solution. With the company we were working with, the implementers we were working with, it just wasn't going to work. And so we had to cut bait and go a different direction. So we ended up back into the market with an RFP and selected GovOS and Clarity. GovOS is an implementer. Clarity was the actual software system. So we hired them to bring on this new system, and we had high hopes for what this system would do for code efficiency. And you probably heard and can recall me saying from this very spot on a couple of occasions, number of occasions probably, that, hey, let us get this implemented and things will change. Well, I'm sorry to say today that this too is another failed project and program. And so we are now going a different direction, and we're going to go out and procure a case management system that is specifically built for code. So that system, that enterprise system, if you will, that can cover a whole lot of different specialties: planning and permitting, fire marshals permitting, building safety inspections, tax and license, code. That system may exist somewhere in the wild. We haven't found it. We haven't found a way to implement a system like that so that it'll work for our city. So we're now doing separated systems. So code will have a case management system, development services will have their system, tax and license will stay on SmartGov for tax and license. And it may be that development services uses SmartGov purchased by Granicus, so it's a different company today. Development services may decide that Granicus is the right choice for them. And if most of the city is going to Granicus after a number of years, code will probably look to see what Granicus could do for case management so that we can all be on one system, which is the ideal. That's kind of the utopian ideal. Whether we can get there or not is yet to be seen. We haven't been able to this point. And so in recognizing the need for a good case management system for code, we're in the market right now talking to different vendors, looking at demonstrations and trying to figure out a direction we want to go. So in 2026, you'll see that we moved cases back. We got rid of Clarity and we moved all our cases back to Glendale 1. And then 2027, we hope to have that new case management system in place. Yes, Ms. Jefferson?
I just wanted to add a few things. During 2020, that was when COVID came about. You know, we changed our processes. We had inspectors that spent more time in the field as opposed to in the office. With the safety requirements, with the spread of COVID, we changed our staffing to where we had one inspector in the office at during a time. So during 2020, a lot of our inspectors were using Hansen for their data entry. We also had a reduction in the number of complaints that were coming in. In 2021, we actually started moving back to the office, so that's why we started transitioning to Glendale 1. So during those years, like I said, we were in two different systems. Currently, our inspectors, our senior inspectors, are also doing business license inspections. So we started that. So they're using SmartGov to enter that information in the system. They're also using Glendale 1. Like Rick said, we're moving back to Glendale 1 because of the Clarity issue. And so right now we have inspectors using quite a few different databases to manage all of their data entry for these cases. So hopefully this year we can move into just code enforcement software specifically, and that'll help to increase our efficiency rate.
Now going on to our code, thank you, Ms. Jefferson. Going on to our code function changes. In 2018, or around 2018, we added Saturday inspections. That was the result of a workshop by your code official and at the time development services director talking about some specific code changes that may have needed to be made. Net result of that conversation from council was the addition of, I believe it was a part-time employee to do Saturday inspections, which is now a rotated assignment, has been a rotated assignment through code for a number of years now. In 2023, we had 12 grids were created to align with the 3 new inspectors that were given to us by the council. And in May of '23, we saw the problem step forward on sober living homes. And so if you'll recall, we had a constituent from the Yucca District come to one of our voting meetings and talking about a situation that she, if I recall, was encountering across the street or next door. And when digging into it, we learned that it was an unlicensed sober living home, and then everything kind of exploded. And we began to realize what a big problem this was across the entire valley, or actual state. And there was a need for us to do some significant enforcement on that front. And so Code was tasked with doing the initial inspections. So when we had a complaint of a sober living home or a suspected sober living home, it was a Code senior inspector that went out, knocked on the door, talked to whoever was there, got the lowdown on what was happening, and then got them into a process to either shut them down or get them properly licensed. But there was a significant workload in that time period that was added to Code. Now, currently, that workload is greatly diminished. We get very few new sober living homes in our community, but it is still a task assigned to the Code Division. And then, as I mentioned in the previous slide, in 2023, we added SmartGov as a tool for the Code Division so that we could do business license inspections for tax and license. I think I skipped, actually, February of '23, added non-case property inspections. And when we go forward in the slides and we look at the slide that has inspections on it, you're going to see in 2025 that we had a huge reduction in the number of inspections that were done on cases that were open. So we went from some number, 38,000 or something like that, to 2025, a little over 25,000, maybe a little under 26,000. It'll be on the slide. When you go to the next slide and you see the number of non-case inspections that we do or had done at that time, you'll see that inspections for the year actually went up a significant percentage. And that's when we implemented the idea of inspecting every property within the city of Glendale as many times as we could per year. So they created within the grid, they had subsections of the grid, and our staff members, inspectors, would work through those subsections so that we ensured that every property in the city of Glendale was inspected as many times a year as we could. And we thought we might be able to do 2 or 3 inspections per property per year. It was more like 1.2,
Correct.
1.3 inspections per year. So we didn't hit the mark we were looking for, but as a new program, you can always make improvements and try to get better. And then in 2024, reduced number of cases that could be submitted via Glendale One from 5 to 2. I believe that was actually calendar year 23, FY 24. I may be wrong about that, though. And then in August of 25, we restructured the grid inspection model from 12 to 9 grids, making 3 of our inspectors solely proactive, allowing the other 9 who were working in the grids to be completely proactive. You'll see a slide later in the presentation that looks at the workload of those specific 9 inspectors. And you'll see that they, even today, are carrying a fairly large number of reactive cases that they're still working from before this change was implemented in August of 25. And as many of you know, because you've heard the complaints from your constituents, I certainly understand the complaints. Why is it taking so long for this property to be brought into compliance? You know as well as I do, the Code Division has our role. We go out, inspect, eventually issue a citation, then there's a timeline that we set for that. Once the citation is issued, it moves over to the court system with a hearing officer for civil and with a prosecutor through Michael Bailey's office for our criminal cases, which are few and far between. The overwhelming majority of what we do is civil, so they're going to a hearing officer over in Judge T. Piazza's court. And then it's up to the judge and his staff to manage that case and work it through. We don't have a lot of say in the timeliness. So we can ask for timeliness and we can pursue timeliness, but ultimately the docket each day determines what a hearing officer can do, and we're sometimes left waiting longer than our constituents would like. And then also in August of 25, I mentioned 3 territories were created for proactive casework. Or I'm sorry, for reactive casework. So we have 3 doing reactive, 9 doing proactive. I'm going to get this right, I promise you.
Mayor?
Brett?
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm, though, that the, in 2024, the number, not only was the number of code cases that a resident was able to submit reduced down to 2, but it was also not within a mile radius of wherever your home was. So, which also restricted, you know, what residents are able to report. That was at the same time, correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
On that note, Mayor and Council, I just wanted to say that we have more than 9 inspectors that operate proactively. We have a total of 18 inspectors. 5 of those are senior inspectors who also do proactive work. But for the proactive initiative, which is what we're discussing today, we have 13 inspectors that are currently working this proactive initiative. So you got 3 that are handling all complaints within the city of Glendale, 3 inspectors. Then you have 9 inspectors that have proactive territories. We also have a part-time inspector that's doing signs. Also sign complaints come into him, and that inspector is also operating proactively. So I know the numbers look different, you know, when we talk about 9 inspectors for the city of Glendale. I just wanted to add that note that we also have 5 senior inspectors that are operating proactively. Their casework, they're handling complex cases like building without permit, business license inspections, things of that sort. So not necessarily property maintenance, but they still play a factor.
Moving on to the next slide, these are the total code cases with proactive cases included, demarcated by the orange line that cuts through the middle. Those cases below the line, I'm going to look to Stephen, are the proactive cases, and the ones above the line are the reactive cases.
So the line, if I may. Mayor and Council, the line shows the number of proactive cases. The number, like, let's look at 2019. When you see 4,889, that's total cases.
Yes. So in 2025, properties with violations. So we have 45,644 residential properties within the city of Glendale that we were trying to inspect, as I said, as many times per year as we could. In the inspection of all of those properties, 7,189 of those properties had a violation, which represents about 15.75% of the total inspections that we did. And I'll let Chaucer speak a little bit to what that means, but when you look at the time period of 2022 to 2025, one of the things that stands out is there's a 65% increase in the number of violations that are on a particular, 65% of the inspections, 65% more, I tell you I'm going to get this right, 65% more of the inspections that we're doing resulted in a noticed violation. However, same time period, the number of the percentage of properties that had violations on them reduced from about 16 to 14%. So within our community, about 14% of the properties overall of those 46,499, whatever it was, total parcels, about 14% of them have a violation. The reason why there was a 65% increase in the number of inspections that resulted in a notice is because we're more focused in what we're doing. It's the only explanation I can come up with is the inspections that we're doing have more relevance and meaning. So we're inspecting those properties more regularly that have routine violations. And I maybe should have added in here when the repeat offender program was implemented, I believe it was 2024, FY25, somewhere in there. But because of that push towards repeat offenders, more of our inspections result in violations over that time period.
Mayor? So, thank you. So, back to slide, page 5, where you're showing the number of proactive cases as for 2025, 54, 56. Sorry, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So the total with the 9 you have assigned to ongoing proactive enforcement, and then you said an additional 5, that's 14. So basically, if I'm doing the math right, that comes out to about 7.5 proactive cases per week per person. Does that sound about right?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, the only stipulation I would add is that our senior inspectors work both proactive and reactive cases, and today I don't have the data on what percentage of their cases are reactive versus proactive, but the 5 senior inspectors Ms. Jefferson just mentioned are not solely proactive. They also do reactive
Okay.
work, like
All right.
complaints about sober living homes.
All right, and then my other question is, does that include any carryover cases, obviously, from the previous year? I mean, some of these, especially vacant lots around the city are very problematic.
Correct.
And it seems like they never get cleaned up.
Mayor and council, yeah, some of these cases are left over from the prior year. Now, with these inspectors, they also have to do re-inspections on these properties. So when you talk about 7 proactive cases, so that's more in line with our grid inspectors. Our grid inspectors can do a minimum of 7 proactive cases a day. Senior inspectors that handle building without permit, building modification, illegal land use, those numbers change. They may be around 6 to 8 cases a day, but that's including new cases, proactive cases, and re-inspections. Our grid level staff can do more than 6, 7 cases a day, but that includes re-inspections as well. And like you asked about, some of those cases are left over from the following year. Some of those are cases that we issued a criminal citation on or a civil case, and those take time.
Okay, so this is per week, though. So I just did the 9 proactive. I left the 5 out now, and that came out to about 11.5 a week, though, not a day. Does that sound about right for your 9 proactive code inspectors?
Mayor and council, yes, so our inspectors can do about, I would say, on end, and don't quote me, I'm gonna say roughly 15 to 20 inspections a day on properties a day. That's properties that have violations. That's not including properties that don't have a violation. Now, it's hard to say how many proactive because it all depends on the area. If we talk about the Ocotillo district, where every other house may be in violation as opposed to the Cholla district, that would be easier to do 9 proactive cases a day. So it all depends on the territory, what that inspector is seeing when they're out there day to day.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to add something, but we'll let it go. Next slide. So this is the code work percentage of proactive cases. Kind of the interesting thing here is in 2022, which is the data that we can verify, the data we know is reliable, that we can duplicate whenever we want to and gain the same information. 39% of what the code division was doing was proactive, and 61% was reactive. When you go to 2025, those numbers are flipped, where we're now 62% proactive and 38% reactive. And that is in large part because of the investments that this council has made into the code division, and then some changes that we've made on how we're performing the tasks that are put before us. But I think that slide speaks volumes. Proactive, these are the proactive inspectors. So these are the 9 inspectors that are working proactively within the grids. Between the 9 inspectors, you can see there's 198 reactive cases that are still open in Glendale 1 that those 9 people collectively are working. And as Ms. Jefferson just indicated, I think she was saying 6 to 8 cases or 9 cases per day. And Councilmember Tommelchoff, you were talking about 11 and some change within a week per inspector. Those are cases. The number of inspections they can accomplish per day is that 6 to 8, maybe 9 when they're completely proactive in the grid, whereas the senior inspectors can only do 6 to 8 inspections per day because their inspections are more involved, usually involve either some, like a sober living home or some business that exists or some commercial property that has several violations and things that need to be corrected. And so what a senior inspector can do on a daily basis is less than, as far as raw number, less than what a grid inspector can do. So 198 of their cases are still pending within the Glendale 1 system as reactive cases. Our hope is when that number drops to 0 and they're truly 100% proactive, that's when we believe we can hit that benchmark of near 80% proactive caseload. Here is just for your information, cases worked by code by council district over the years. And I'll leave this up for constituents that are watching online for just a second.
Mayor and council, if you look at the years from 2022 to 2025, you can see the switch from being reactive-based to proactive. If we look at the Barrow District, let me see, in 2025, 761 of those cases, 994 of those cases were generated proactively. In comparison to 2022, 547 of those. So our approach did change from 2023 on, and you can see that change in the numbers and what the data shows.
Moving on, number of violations by council district, just for your interest. Probably nothing surprising here.
What's up with Saguaro?
Mayor and council, if you look at the data from 2022 to 2025, the number of violations have generally increased. If we look at the Cholla District, 965 violations were observed in 2025 in comparison to maybe, let's say, the Saguaro District, a little over 3,200 violations. So looking at this data shows us the areas where there is a higher incidence rate of violations. And so we can properly send staff to those areas to address those concerns.
Still less than right.
So here is that slide that I was talking to you about a few minutes ago about case inspections. You see that in 2025, we dropped to 25,571 inspections from 41,866 the year before and 45,982 in 2023, the year before that. Here's the whole story, though. In 2025, we did almost 50,000 inspections of properties that did not have a violation. So those inspections are fairly quickly done. You don't have to spend a lot of time on most of the properties. Drive by, stop in front of the residence, take a look. No obvious violations, move on to the next residence. But we began tracking that information in 2024 because we understood that that was a part of the work that code was doing, and it was data that we weren't capturing. And so in the development of our Tier 2 scorecard, working with Org Performance, Jenny and her team, we recognized that's an important piece of information that we should be tracking and paying attention to. And so we started doing that in 2024. I don't think we did the whole year of 2024, which is why it's only 22,711. I think we implemented that probably about halfway through the year. Not 100% sure, though. And then adding the tax and license inspections that we started in 23. So we only did 41 of them in 23, a very small number. And then you can see the increase over time, a little over 15, just under 1,600, I should say, in 2025. And definitely opportunity to increase that.
Mayor. Mr. St. John, when you say the tax and license inspections, is that the group homes you were referencing earlier?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, no, these are active businesses, usually on usually in commercial districts within our boundaries. A lot of businesses operate without the proper licensing. Some, even a smaller percentage, don't remit taxes. And so code was tasked with looking into that and being a part of the process for ensuring compliance with our codes.
Thank you.
I can't get it to move. There we go. Those are the slides that we have for the data that we wanted to present today. Understanding this is generally about your discussion on this item, Ms. Jefferson and I are happy to sit back and answer any questions you have now.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the present. Oh, we're not looking at me?
Just go ahead.
Oh, okay. I still, I mean, I guess I'm trying to be polite, honestly, because as I drive around the city, I see repeat areas where there's clearly a problem. And a lot of them are not within the 1 mile boundary, so I'm not even allowed to report them. And I feel like, and I know I've been told before, well, you're on the council, you can report them. Like, I shouldn't be given any privilege that any citizen in the city should have. Mm-hmm. And so clearly there's something is wrong. I drive past the field at 60, when I come down here on Alice and 61st or 63rd. The weeds are taller than me. They're always taller than me in that field. And eventually, we should clean and lean it if they're not going to clean it up. I mean, it literally matters to the residents that as they drive around the city. It's not in my district, but the curb appeal of the city, I think, is everybody's business. That's the way I feel about it. And there's areas in my district, you can see in the Cholla district, I mean, there's a lot of HOAs maintain the right-of-way, HOAs maintain a lot of the property around, up in the Cholla district. But the areas where they don't maintain, there's also repeat areas that literally nothing ever happens unless I file a code complaint about the area. It's just, obviously somebody's not, and I think we were told that is it 3 times? What are the, I didn't see that you mentioned that, but how often do the proactive people go around their grid a year?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchaff, I don't know that number yet. When we were doing under the 12 grid system and we did those near 50,000 inspections that year, they were working both proactive and reactive cases. They only got through their grid a little over 1.2, 1.3 times. So not as many as we were hoping for.
Okay. I mean, but certainly they should be noticing major arterial streets, especially along 59th Avenue specifically, where there's been an ongoing issues with the exact same properties year after year after year, where anybody can drive by and see that there's a problem there. And the right-of-way, a lot of the problems around the city, and I know we had a lot of rain, and I know the weeds are growing, but we should take a lot of pride in the right-of-way, especially where the cities, it's not all of it is ours, some of it's other people's responsibility. But to get that into compliance where we don't have tall weeds everywhere people are driving around the city and looking. And I think it's to our advantage to allow residents to be the eyes of the community and to be able to report issues. If it's already an open proactive case, the response just needs to simply be, we have an open case. I don't know if you can give the person the case number. I don't know whether that's,
Sure.
And say, we have an open case, the case was opened, provide information to the person to know that the city's already working this case, instead of just saying you can't report it, saying we're working on it, and being a little more communicative. I think that's one of the problems is the amount, and I shared with Mr. St. John just recently, I've reported a code complaint in my district, and the response that I got after over a couple of weeks was, it basically was conflicting what the top part of the response said to what the bottom part of the response said. So the top part said, we're waiting for the person to bring the property into compliance, and then the bottom said, we're gonna clean and lean it. So I mean, I have the advantage of being able to reach directly out to you and say, what does this mean? But not every resident knows who to talk to. They come back to their council member, they come back to somebody else and saying, I don't understand what's going on. So I think part of the problem is communication, and I know there's softwares, but it's also somebody's entering that into Glendale One. And I know we've spoken before about Glendale One is not ideal how we handle these code cases, but to not allow residents to file a complaint more than twice a week, and to not allow somebody who drives past the same code violation on their way to and from work every day because it's not within a mile of where they live, I think is a mistake. I think it's a mistake. They should be able to report it, and we should be communicating with them if it's already an open proactive case. I think we have the obligation to do our best to present a clean city. I understand that there's bigger problems when you get into actual neighborhoods and residential streets, and I know the parking violations are very, very difficult to enforce. That's why I know we've adjusted some of the times that the people are working, so that if you go out to look for somebody who's got multiple cars parked in their front yard, and you go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, they're probably all at work, so you're not going to catch them. So, to be able, I understand it requires a variety of tactics to be able to cite repeated violations, and I know a lot of the repeat offenders are code issues. But I think and I know you've done a lot of work to try to improve things, but honestly, I feel like we still have a long way to go. I feel like it's an obligation of ours to enforce the ordinances that we adopted, are a covenant with the community, that these are the things the city's gonna do to protect your property value. And that's a covenant that we made with the community, that we're gonna do this to protect your property value. And I think the council in the past has said, what do you need in order to do that? And so that's where I'm coming from, is if you need more from us, then tell us what you need. But myself, and I know there's several of us that agree with this, want every effort to be made to protect the beauty of our city, and to protect how somebody's property is valued if they're living across the street or down the street or next door to somebody that's got a bunch of junky cars parked in their front yards, tall weeds that they have to drive past going in and out of their neighborhood every day. We should be doing better there. And I for one think we should remove the restrictions. Hopefully that's what I'm advocating for us to do that today, is that we at least start by removing the restrictions that restricts residents' ability to report things that they see every day. Thank you.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I also have an issue with the restrictions. I've driven the whole city at different times and have seen violations, and I can't report them because they're not where I live. I do want to say that some of the Glendale ones that I've reported, you guys have responded to quickly, and so you guys are doing a good job, but I think having restrictions isn't a good thing. If you guys need more personnel, maybe we need to consider that while we're in budget, because to me, it kind of sounds like maybe you guys need more people, you need more help. I'm willing to talk about that, because we do need to keep the city looking clean. I have a abandoned house on 67th Avenue that's just south of Camelback. It's been vacant for a long time. The weeds are, and it's a main street. It looks terrible. I put it in Glendale 1. I know you guys will get to it eventually, but and there's been other ones where I reported and it was cleaned up right away. So you guys are doing a good job, but to me, it sounds like maybe you need more help.
Where's the house at?
67th Avenue, south of Bethany.
Good Camelback.
I meant Bethany.
I was gonna say, that's Phoenix, that's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I wouldn't have any problem removing the restriction on the 1 mile limit, but I'd like to get a little more information, and I know you have it, regarding the more than 2 complaints per week. In the past, when that rule wasn't in place, I know we had 5 per week, and we had that for a reason. I wouldn't want to open it up to unrestricted, but how many individuals actually complain that we don't have the ability to put in more than 2 per week? I mean, you get those and they get kicked back. So I would guess you have statistics on that.
Mayor, members of the council, or Vice Mayor Malinar, I'm only aware of 1 complaint, 1 constituent complaining about the number of cases being reduced. I can think of a handful of others that have probably complained about it. It just hasn't come across my desk.
Okay. For me personally, I really am impressed with the proactive process that you're moving into. I know that I have felt it from my residents who don't normally get any proactive processing in some of the neighborhoods where they don't really complain, but they're not either in compliance. And so the proactive cases have come to my attention, even more recent than in the past, because I know that you're out there doing that. I do believe the proactive process is really the way we want to go. You know, that city you mentioned that's at 99%, back in probably about 2000, 2005, in the city of Glendale, when I was living here, it seemed like we had a really high proactive process. And I hope we can get back to that. And I know it's a little bit concerning for some residents who have never been contacted because they have felt like it was okay to leave things out or to not perhaps maintain their property as well as they could because nobody in their neighborhood complained about it. So the proactive to me is really critical to continue and to push. My concern, I guess, if we only have 2 or 3 people that have more than 2 complaints that would like to put more than 2 complaints in per week, I mean, if we feel like that's actually helping the city, I wouldn't have a problem raising that a little bit, but I wouldn't want to leave it open-ended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank you for the presentation. It's very detailed. I want to say, like, maybe back in November, December, there was some restructuring, and you had asked for some time so that you could see if the changes implemented had improved the situation, and specifically how you, with your years of experience, how, Mrs. Jefferson, how you've, like, if the changes you made really did work, if they really did help. And I want to say, like, probably like a week or 2 after that presentation, I was at a constituent's home and he asked me to come over and we talked for about an hour or so, and I explained what was happening that had just happened, the presentation. I asked him for some grace, if he gave me some time so they can make those changes and see how things are happening, because he was very concerned that code wasn't getting into his neighborhood. And I was trying to explain the process that, from how I understood it, and he says, okay, I understand a little bit better now. He goes, I'll definitely give you some time to let those changes develop and see what happens. And I forget if it was November, December time. Now we're in March. In your honest assessment, since then, what is your feeling, so that when I can go back to him and explain to him, have the changes helped? Have they gotten better? Have we been able to be more efficient? What is your, just so I can, what would you tell him so I can relay the message?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I moved into this position. I was promoted in May of 2025. I fully took it on after Tim retired, so June 1st of 2025. And the idea was brought to me, so we made a change. So we went to 9 proactive territories and 3 complaint-based territories. Like I said, the senior inspectors still have their own areas that they have to work based on looking at the numbers and the data. And I look back over the prior years, prior to being proactive to now, I can see that there has been a change. Like I said, we're more targeted. A lot of times when we get complaints, and I'll just tell you, because I've been in the world of code for 18, 19 years now, first in Maryland and now here, I know that we've been used. I can't say that all constituents are responsible when they're calling in complaints. I know we've been called, to go to a constituent because there's a personal vendetta. Maybe they don't like the way that person looks. And, we get quite a few complaints about harassment. We're not harassing, we're out here to do a job, and we want to keep maintaining property values, right? I understand how that has an impact on the neighborhood. I'm also a homeowner, so I'd have problems if my neighbor was living in a manner, and it's bringing down my home property value, so I understand and I relate, but from what I see based on that proactive initiative, I can say that there's been a change. Instead of receiving complaints that take us here and there, those aren't really the areas that have issues. Sometimes that is the case, but when our inspectors are proactively, and it can be up to us to decide where to send them, we're more targeted. We're seeing that the number of violations that we're checking for has increased time and time again. My thoughts are, if we keep moving forward in the proactive model, the number of violations that we're coming across will eventually decrease. Now, as Rick showed in one of the slides, there's about 45,000 properties in the city of Glendale. We have 18 inspectors, so that's a large territory that, we have to cover. I try to explain to constituents what our model is. They're going proactively. So each inspector has been assigned with going to at least every property in their territory at least one time. 2 times, sometimes is acceptable. 3 times, even better within that year. That's what we're striving for. So we figure if our proactive inspectors can be more effective going proactively, that'll reduce the number of complaints. When I look at the violation rate, that's one way that you can measure your enforcement efficiency. When we look at the violation rate, and I'll go back in 2022, when we weren't proactive, we were primarily complaint-based, leaving it up to the constituents to call in complaints. Our violation rate was at 19.78%. Since then, that violation rate has decreased over the years. So currently in 2025, we're at 14.90%. So that shows me that the proactive initiative is working. It's moving in the direction that it's intended to. Now, I know you guys drive across properties that may have high grass and weeds or vacant lots, but at the same time, with a lot of those properties, we do have cases open. We aren't going out there to actually clean them. We try to give that property owner time to be responsible to and address their property instead of the city having to spend their own resources to address those properties. Now, if that property owner is negligent and refuses not to be responsible, then yes, we will invoke that clean and lean process and have one of our vendors go out there and clean. One of the things that you spoke to, Councilmember Tomichov, was repeat offenders. So that did come out, I want to say last year, and I have gotten with our IT team, and we are now tracking repeat offenders. So we're having an idea of where these repeat offenders are. We have a new code that we can use to enforce upon the repeat offenders, where we can increase those penalties. So I feel like we are making strides to change the way to improve property values, right, and to address constituents. I know sometimes people get concerned about only being able to call in 2 complaints a week, but sometimes they find out that we already have an open case. So if we have to do better with our communication to those constituents and letting them know that there is an open case, we can do that. Another resource for them is our case map. So the case map shows each of the properties in the city of Glendale, and it shows a bubble if there's an open violation notice on that property or if there has been in the future. So there are other resources constituents can use to check for violations. But like I said, in my opinion, I believe the proactive enforcement model that we're moving to is working. Now, we can make some modifications because from what I'm hearing, visibility may be a concern. And so I have some ideas in the work that maybe I'll roll out after I get the blessings from St. John. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, learning a lot through this conversation and the presentation. I appreciate that. I will say I know how frustrating code enforcement and code issues are for me at times. I can only imagine what it's like for you guys. You have my sympathy. But it's extremely important to our residents, and it's it's kind of, as you might say, where the rubber meets the road in communities. So I feel clearly we're on the right track. I've been frustrated, and maybe I've made comments in workshops in the past that maybe weren't as appreciative of the complexities as they could have been. I do feel like we're headed in a good direction. And I guess I'll just say for other council members, if you notice something in my district that is concerning to you, please let me or my assistant know. And that way my assistant can check against open code cases in our district and see whether it's a work in progress, maybe something we're already concerned about as well. But if it's a work in progress, then we don't need to add another Glendale 1 case on top of it that has to be responded to. But we can put it on our short list of things we're watching and take that over. It's those of us down here closer to City Hall have the luxury of having council members drive through our district all the time, whereas we may not get out to yours as often. But no, we all are concerned about the code issues, and so given that there's a limit on how many you can report directly, just send them to my office, and we'll make sure that to see first if it's duplicative, and then if it's not, then we'll get it in the works one way or another. Going forward, the question at hand, we have two restrictions I think that are under consideration today. One is the 1 mile radius as a restriction for reporting, and the other is the number of cases that you can report in any given period of time, I think a month. I could see that one or both of those could be adjusted a little bit, as Councilmember Malinar suggested. I don't want to throw the city wide open for as many as possible because I don't think that's helpful. I think that distracts our code enforcement from working the plan that they have. So I'd be interested in your professional recommendation. If we were to make a change, would it be better to change the diameter from which people can report, or would it be better to maybe allow the few outliers that we have that would like to report a lot of cases, should we allow them to report a few more each month?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, if I can take the first swing at this, and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Jefferson. Going back to the conversation we had when that 1 mile radius rule was implemented, the idea behind it was demonstrated interest in the violation, if that makes sense. So if you're a commuter from the Ocotillo district to the Cholla district for work or because that's where you play, and you're noticing violations on 59th Avenue, you have an interest in that. That's a regularly commuted roadway that you take, and there's an interest that you have. You certainly have an interest in your neighborhood and things that are occurring in your neighborhood when you're out with your kids or you're out walking your dog or whatever takes you out into the neighborhood. When you see violations within your neighborhood, there's a demonstrated interest. You have an interest in that. When you drive from your neighborhood to a random neighborhood in a completely different area of town for the sole purpose of driving around looking for code violations, that's when I say, okay, was that why we established Glendale 1, is so that we could allow for that to happen? For someone that doesn't even live in the community or anywhere near the community, or in one case, even in our city, person doesn't even live in our city, drives into our city and files complaints about properties within our city. Are there violations at those locations? Can't deny that there are. But was that the intent of Glendale 1? And when we started kind of working through that on what was defensible, should someone file a claim against the city, it's hard to define what having an interest means. But that was the intent. And so, and I'll give an example. We had issued a notice of violation to a business owner on Glendale Avenue. He had the feather signs out in the city's right-of-way, so it was on his side of the sidewalk, but still within the city right-of-way. Property that he as a business owner is responsible for. It's not right-of-way's responsibility for that edge there, but it is city right-of-way. It's a violation of the code to have those feather signs in that area. He was served notice, conversation, second notice, conversations, final notice, before he finally decided, okay, I'll take them down. Then that person drove every arterial street in our city and filed 50 or more complaints about other businesses that, in their opinion, had similar or same violations that he was being held accountable for. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to say. That was never the intent of Glendale 1. Glendale 1 wasn't implemented so that a business owner that feels like they were wronged by the city or wronged by the code division could go out and get retribution. That's not why we implemented Glendale 1. We implemented Glendale 1 to make it easy for your constituents to communicate with city staff issues that they were having. Potholes, garbage can wasn't picked up, overhanging tree on a sidewalk, code violations on properties, whether commercial or residential. I think there's room to make change. I think that the changes that we implemented a number of years ago now with reducing to 2 in the 1 mile radius has had the net impact that we were looking for. It's allowed for us to become more proactive. I think if we were to change that today and say increase it to 3 or 4 or 5 cases per week, and then change the language around where you can file a code complaint. So any arterial or anything in your neighborhood, for example, I think that's defensible. I think I don't think that'll have an overt negative impact on what code is trying to do. I think that if we did say it's unlimited and you can file cases at your will from any area, I think that would impact our ability to be more proactive than reactive. But I do think there is some room for this council to make, from, again, professional experience opinion. I don't have 18 plus years in code, so I'll defer to Tasha, but my perspective, I think there's room to make some adjustments here.
Mayor and council, on that note, I agree with like what Rick said. I think that if we increase the number of complaints that constituents are going to be able to make, that kind of changes our approach from a proactive model to a reactive model. We find success with our inspectors having that ability to navigate through these areas and look for violations and properties that are in violation, right? And so I feel like onus should be on the code inspector staff, not necessarily the complainants, right? Not necessarily the constituents. I feel like we're more effective, when we can operate proactively as opposed to complaint-based reactively. So I would like to continue moving in that direction. I know, let me see, in the past, when it was 5 complaints per week, there were a few incidences and morale kind of changed behind some things that had happened. Our admin staff began stacking cases because we had a constituent who was calling in 5 complaints a week. So with that, more than 5 complaints a week. And so our staff was about 3 months behind on just getting those complaints out to the inspector, because we're trying to stay within our KPI of doing a response to the property within 2 business days. So we were stacking complaints, and with that one constituent, we also were improperly allocating our resources. So we had staff members that were just operating in those neighborhoods because of where that person was calling. And so we couldn't go to those areas that really needed our help. So those are some of the reasons we would prefer to stay with a proactive approach as opposed to a complaint-based approach.
Before I get to you guys, it seems to me that we're sort of, it's like everybody's kind of missing the point. If the need's there, if we really have a problem, maybe we should be looking at hiring a couple more inspectors. We're in a process right now. I don't know budget-wise how we're doing, but I don't want to start doing anything crazy, changing what you're trying to accomplish, but it seems like if you had a couple more inspectors, that could get you caught up a little bit better, and then maybe once we get a better handle and we get the numbers down lower, then maybe we could start figuring out what would be best. But it seems to me if we don't have the enforcement available, we can mess this all up and make it worse if we're not careful. So I'm going to go to you next, and then Lauren, you next.
Thank you, Mayor. And to follow up on the mayor's idea of more inspectors, I have a question about before the rule of 2 complaints per week versus after. What exactly did the code compliance change after that rule was implemented in order to ensure that those areas that were previously being reported in terms of the reactive, what changed between before the rule and after the rule inside of the department?
Yeah, so before the rule, when we were accepting 5 complaints a week, our department was mainly complaint-based. So constituents were calling in complaints, and that's what we were responding to. Now, when we were at that property, we had the option to do an expanded audit. So look at the other properties next to it and, issue a notice of violation. But like I said, that was a complaint-based approach. When the rule have changed and we went to 2 complaints a week, that was also around the time that we became proactive. So we're taking those 2 complaints a week, but our inspectors were also going proactively throughout these territories looking for violations. So our model changed from a complaint-based approach to a proactive approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I could follow up. So it sounds to me that this whole proactive versus reactive is a justification for limiting the amount of complaints to 2. But what I'm also understanding is that when you have more proactive, that means that that's just because those other complaints aren't being filed into the Glendale One system. So obviously your percentage is going to be higher of proactive because you're limiting the amount of reactive cases that can come into the system. Is that correct?
Mayor and council, I hear what you're saying. So yes, like what you said, if we're limiting the number of complaints that we can receive, our proactive numbers were going to go up. The other side of that is our violation rate. So when we were complaint-based, taking in complaints from constituents more than 5 a week or what have you, the number of violations that we were finding is much lower than what we're finding now. Now with the inspectors operating proactively, we're able to pick up more violations as opposed to before.
Okay.
If I may add, Councilmember Conchas, Mayor Councilmember Conchas, if you remember during the presentation, our numbers of violations per inspection increased by 65% over that 2022 to 2025 time period, which means the inspectors are out doing the more important work. They're finding the violations. More of their inspections result in violations. We get a number of complaints through Glendale One where someone thinks there's a violation on the property and there's actually not. But it still takes time for the inspector to drive the location, do the inspection, and then communicate back to your constituent that while they think there's a violation there, that the property is actually in compliance.
Mayor, if I can ask 2 more questions. So in terms of what I'm understanding is that we changed the rule because there was one person in particular that was submitting a lot of code compliant complaints. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Conchas, no, there were about a dozen or so that were in the system fairly regularly. There were a couple, more than one, that were filing at a minimum 5 per week, usually more than that, which, to Ms. Jefferson's point, we were stacking and trying to put into the system week by week. So 5 cases, if somebody submits 15 cases, it's going to take us 3 weeks to get those implemented, right? And so we're stacking those, and it takes administrative time to stack those and make sure they're put into the system when they should be. And we don't want to enter cases into a system when it was a transient violation that's no longer there. So we wanted to go out and make sure the violation was still existing before assigning an inspector to it.
And so if the city council and the city manager's office was to expand the administrative capabilities that the department has, would you all be able to accept an unlimited amount of complaints per month?
Mayor, Councilmember Conchas, I don't know how I could say that with 100 people, for example, that I couldn't manage administratively an unlimited number of code violations being submitted by any given person within the community. Looking at the number of inspectors we have today, proactive, reactive, senior inspectors, supervisors, admin staff, the code official, 25 people that are there today, we would not be able to manage administratively stacking cases 5 at a time even, much less unlimited. So one of the rules that, one of the stipulations that changed along with the 1 mile radius and the 2 cases per week was we told your constituents we're not going to stack cases anymore. So if you submit 4 cases in 1 week, we're going to accept the 2, and we're going to respond to you that the other 2 need to be resubmitted by you if the violation still exists next week. And so I would recommend maintaining that policy. So if we do decide to increase the number of cases from 2 to 3 or 4 or what have you, and we do decide to make some changes to where a person can file a complaint, a demonstrated interest complaint-driven system, if you will, but we don't stack cases when a business owner, for example, goes out and submits 50 Glendale ones all at once, then I think administratively we could manage that.
Mayor, I would be in support of at least 2 or 1 or 2 per day for the constituents to come in. I actually don't think that we should have any limit whatsoever, but if there is not consensus to remove the rule, then I would say at least 1 or 2 per day per resident. And then I want to shift to the mile radius because what I've heard is something about comment or interests, some type of interest in that. And in 2023, the Glendale, the Daily Independent said that Glendale has the 4th worst commute in the U.S. and it says 1 in 10 workers commute more than an hour in Glendale, and that the average is about 20 miles for folks who live, who work outside of Glendale and live in Glendale. And so, the other point that I want to make is that my district goes all the way north to Peoria, and I live south of Glendale. And so with the 1 mile radius rule, I cannot, in terms of this rule, I cannot submit anything that is happening on Peoria Avenue within my district. And so I don't think the 1 mile radius thing is data driven. I think that it feels to me that it was something that was just, created out of nowhere. And I think that the council should consider removing that 1 mile radius because we all commute and we all enjoy different parts of the city. We talked about Heroes Park in the last workshop. My family, we have birthday parties there at Heroes Park, and we live in the Cactus District. It's more than a mile away, and so I would support removing the 1 mile radius and then expanding the number of violations from 2 to 7 or 14 per week. Thank you.
Your microphone on?
turned it off, okay, because I wanted to get a drink of water. My thought was that when I asked to bring this back was that we just go back to the previous, where it was 5 a week, and we get rid of the 1 mile boundary. And I understand about stacking complaints, but then there's the other side of the coin, and it's the resident that lives in an area that is completely frustrated with what's happening around his home or her home. And that is also part of the conversation, and that's who I work for, that's who we work for, is the people who are saying, why do I have to live with this? And when is the city gonna get my neighborhood cleaned up? I mean, that's the issue, is that if somebody was happy with the way their neighborhood looked, and it wasn't cars parked in front yards and illegal work trucks and whatever else it is, because what happens is somebody sees it and then they say, oh, nothing happened to that person, I'm going to do it too. Or somebody's looking at a house in the neighborhood and they buy the house because they say, apparently anything goes around here, and it starts to spread. The problem becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think by restricting somebody's ability to complain, we're allowing the problem to grow, because that person is concerned about their neighborhood. Most of those complaints, I believe, were about in the proximity of where these people live, whatever the 50, that's excessive. A business who says, why was I targeted? Why weren't the rest of them targeted? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, not that doesn't matter, but I'm talking about people who are really, really frustrated with how their neighborhood looks. And we have a responsibility to do something about that. That's my point. The 1 mile, I think that it's good to have people file complaints, as he said, we can't even file a complaint for something that's in our district because it's more than a mile from where we live. I don't think that's a good policy. That's my opinion. And that the 5 a week, I think, are allowable. Now, if we want to put a restriction on how many, say 5 a week, if the person's really, really frustrated because something keeps happening, and depending on as I said before, what the violation, especially with parking violations, those need to be observed later in the day or on Saturday. So, I mean, and one of your slides shows that no violation was seen. Doesn't mean there wasn't a violation at the time the person filed the violation either. So depending on what the violation is, some of them have wheels on them and can be moved. So, I know you've made improvement. I can see in the slides that you've made improvement, and I appreciate the work that you've done. But like I said earlier, I think we have a long way to go. And, without losing sight of who we're working for the residents of the city who are literally driving home at the end of the day after working and saying, I hate the way my neighborhood looks. That's not okay with me. So I think we should go back to the 5, and I think we should remove the 1 mile boundary. Thank you,
Mayor,
Mayor.
if I may respond just briefly, Councilmember Tommelchoff, thank you for that. And you're not going to get any disagreement from Ms. Jefferson and I on the things that you've stated. I would encourage all council members to tell those constituents that feel like they're not getting a response from code to call the code division. So anytime someone files a Glendale 1 complaint, they're given a response that has the inspector's name and phone number, contact phone number. So if they have multiple violations on their street within their neighborhood, and they feel like they're not getting the response from code they need, call us, because we want to know about those things, and we want to be active in those communities where there are people who want to see the activity, number one. And number two, that tells us where the activity needs to be. Hopefully, we already know. Hopefully, we already have the open cases. But I would never discourage someone who has a genuine interest in improving their community from filing complaints. In fact, the person who was complaining about the reduction the most, I've had multiple conversations with and have said, anytime you want to reach out to me and talk about a specific case or an issue that you're having or a trend that you're seeing, I'm happy to have that conversation. And I would say the same for any other constituent in our community. I'm happy to have the conversation on how we can improve. But I don't disagree with anything that you said.
So, I mean, and I guess sorry, Mayor, can I respond to that? Is there a way that we could say that, to have, and I don't know what software and what, those capabilities you have with technology to be able to say, if it's within your neighborhood, if it's within your community, within a mile of where you live, and your complaints are about your neighborhood where you live, that we're gonna allow you to make 5 complaints a week. And if you're gonna have complaints about something you see on an arterial street, that and I'm okay with limiting that, because those are things, I mean, even though you drive past it every day, you file the complaint, then a lot of those are commercial properties or abandoned properties or other properties where we're gonna have to, at some point just decide to clean it up and leave the property, and we get paid whenever it gets sold. But with whether we have a different rule for complaints that are not within your community, and let the people who, because that's my primary concern, is people who are just absolutely fed up with how their neighborhood looks. And so we let them file complaints, and then we have another rule for complaints that are outside of the area where you live. Is that possible to even do?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, I think anything is possible. I think we would just have to work on some language with the city attorney's office to make sure if someone did file a claim against the city, we feel our position is defensible. But to your point, I think you could have a different rule for residential versus commercial. So you could say simply, a constituent can file 5 residential complaints or 2 commercial complaints, because those are hitting separate work groups within the code division. Senior inspectors handle the commercial, grid inspectors handle the residential. I think having a different rule for each might make sense.
Okay, I would be supportive of that.
Ray, I'm going to go to you in a second. Again, I'm still having a hard time understanding, if we don't have enough people to get to every complaint we have, how is changing any of this going to make any difference? We need more code enforcement people. Is that correct?
Mayor, I'm not going to sit here and tell you today that we need more code enforcement people. What I will tell you is we need to make changes. Councilmember Tommelchoff has said it a number of times. We have a long way to go. And I've said, Tasha and I don't disagree with that statement. We do have a long way to go. We have a lot more work that needs to be done and a lot more efficiency that needs to be created. I don't want to sit here and tell you that if you give me 2 more inspectors, I'm going to change the tone of how code is viewed by your constituents. I don't know that I can do that. And I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep. What I can tell you is we are working on creating those internal efficiencies. Once we've created those internal efficiencies and have run the program for a while, I'll be able, and it won't be me, it'll be org performance and the people that work with statistics will tell you, if you add 2 more inspectors, here's the net result you could expect. I can't tell you what that is today because we don't have a case management system that's built for code. And until we have a true code case management system that does all the things that we need it to do for efficiencies, I'm not sure what adding 2 more inspectors is going to net this council. And I don't want to sit here and tell you something that isn't true.
I guess we look at things differently. If a ship or a boat sinking and you're bailing it out with a coffee cup, you're going to bail it out quicker with the 5-gallon bucket. So all I'm saying, if you have more people that can go out to the site, talk to the people, and enforce it, that should get you better results than just taking more complaints when you're still trying to bail out with a coffee cup.
So Mayor, using
That's
the
my
same
point.
analogy, if I may, I hope the statistics today have shown that the ship isn't sinking, that we're trending in the right direction, that things are going well. A lot of work to be done still, not disagreeing with that, but the ship certainly isn't sinking. We're making good progress.
Okay, I understand that, not yet. I understand that, but to get us there quicker, my point is if you had a couple extra people, that should get you where you want to get quicker, which then, all this other stuff we're talking about, then it wouldn't make any difference once you're caught up if people are making more complaints, because you can act on them much quicker, correct?
Mayor, I can't disagree with that. I mean, that's true of
Mayor,
probably
can I
every
just ask a
city
question?
department.
No, Ray's next.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor. My position on this is that I am really strongly advocating for a proactive process. I believe changing the rules too aggressively is going to slow that down. I've seen the improvements. We're not there yet. I agree. I've specifically sat down with you folks and we've talked about it, and and I've suggested some statistics that we need to bring to pass so we can see that better, and you're working on that. I understand that the system that you implemented has failed, basically. The CARIS system, or Korean, whatever it's called.
Vice Mayor, it was called Clarity.
Clarity, oh, that's right. Clarity, and I know that I was really hoping, as we brought this forward, that that was really going to provide the system we needed to really make it efficient and make it work, and it has failed. And it has set you back, and I recognize that. And so I'm willing to allow for a little more time to get this proactive process going. And I do believe down the road, maybe additional manning would be helpful. I had a chance a couple of weeks ago. I was speaking with a code official from Peoria and asked how many folks that they had on their enforcement, and I was blown away by the quantity. They have quite a large crowd of inspectors, from what I understand. And I also understand that they are pretty compliant in Peoria. At the same time, I recognize something else. We have a cultural challenge. There are some neighborhoods that culturally it's a real challenge to get them to take care of their properties. And no matter how often we stop by, it only lasts a few weeks and then it goes back. And I know that in my district, the statistics are high, as was pointed out, but it's because of some of that issue. And because I have complained enough about code compliance that I know you're actively working in my district, and the code officers in there are very diligent in following up and doing what they need to do. So I'm not so much in favor of removing the restrictions we have, though I would suggest that we do take away the 1 mile limit so that we do have more flexibility within our own districts, and that a citizen seeing something outside of their district or out of their neighborhood would be able to see that. But raising it much more, I would say maybe if you want to, as a compromise, raise it up to 3 per week and never stacking. I could work that, but I want to give your department enough time to get to the point with a new system and make a difference. And I think it's getting there, but I think we're not there yet. So I don't want to say we don't need to do better, but we do. And along that point, I wanted to ask about the technology, not the system, but the technology on the road. I talked to you about this some time ago. Are we getting to the point where we're being much more efficient with our inspectors as they're out there on the road and how they're using, are we getting a new system? Are they having onboard computers that can print a violation without taking excess hours inputting into another system? Tell me about that real quickly, but I think that concludes my remarks. I would support removing the mile, but if we raise the weekly, raise it only a very minor amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Currently, our inspectors have laptops, so they have stands in each of their trucks. So they have a laptop that they can use to do their data entry in the field. With those laptops, they also have a printer that's connected through Bluetooth technology, so they can print notices while they're in the field operating proactively or complaint-based. Each of them either has an internal SIM with Wi-Fi connectivity or a jetpack. And so we pretty much have what we need in the field as far as devices are concerned. The biggest problem has been our case management system. And so we've had, 3 or 4 changes since I've been here. And we're currently shopping for new software for the inspectors to use so that we can operate, like I said, in a better fashion.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, if I can add to that, some of the efficiencies that a case management system can create is the mapping system. So every day an inspector comes to work, their route of inspections is already mapped out by an AI GIS system that says this is the best way to conduct the number of inspections that you need to conduct today. And then any new cases that come in that are assigned by the administrator, that inspector, if they're a reactive inspector, can get built into that map. And so they don't have to sit at a desk for the first hour of their shift looking at every inspection that needs to occur today and what their plan of attack is. It's given to them when they walk through the door. That's big. That saves a lot of time. The other thing that's big is the ability to do your work from the field. And so currently, under the system that we tried to implement, the promise was you would be able to do that through an app on the tablet while you're out in the field. What we found was the app didn't work. It wasn't communicating back to the, I'll say, the mother system that was on-prem here. And so the inspectors were having to document their work in the field, then come back to the office and take that documentation and now implement it from the app into the on-prem system that we use to track everything and to manage our cases. That's a terrible inefficiency. I mean, you're basically doubling the workload for an inspection that has a violation at that point. Glendale One works better than that, and so that's why we've made the decision to go back to Glendale One, get off of that other system. We had the option of staying on that other system until we procured a true case management system, but in speaking to Ms. Jefferson and her team, go back to Glendale One. It was easier to operate these cases or work these cases out of Glendale One than this system. But Glendale One doesn't do the GIS mapping and won't give you the route, those kinds of things. A true code case management software should and hopefully will do those things. Those are tremendous efficiencies.
Thank you, Mayor. That was what I was going to ask you is it going to take until 2027 to, you know, purchase and install and implement a new software package? Is there any way to do, because that seems to be one of the biggest issues is that we've been struggling to find software that actually does what we need it to do.
Council and Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor and Council. Yes, we're currently exploring options right now. Last week, we had our inspectors in a software demo environment. So we're looking at 2 different companies. Can I say the name? Is it no? No? Okay. So we're looking at 2 different companies right now that are offering code management software for our inspectors. So right now, we're checking in the integration, if those systems are able to integrate with our GIS, our Glendale One system right now, and then we'll be making a decision here shortly. So like I said, we've shopped the market. We're in those demo environments. We've had a chance for our inspectors to check it out, our supervisors to check it out. I've also looked at it. We looked at reporting, routing options, things of that sort. We're looking at the integration, but we should have a decision here, I want to say within the next month or so. But I hope, you know, to implement the system this year, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is there any way, I mean, the sooner we can get something implemented and start using something that actually works for code case management. We've been hearing for, you can see in the charts, years now that we need a system that's going to manage our code cases, but we still don't have it. So, and then before we move ahead with it, do they like let us talk to other cities that use it so we can, I mean, I want us to be sure this time that we're that we're going to get what we need and that we're going to be happy with it and it's going to work for us. So, the sooner, I know that's one of the problems, and I'm trying to remember what Councilmember Melner, I mean, I guess we don't have to go back to 5 cases, but I still feel like, especially if they're residential only in nature, so it's somebody only complaining about what's happening in their own neighborhood, I don't think 2 is sufficient, because those are the people who are really, really frustrated with the condition of their neighborhood, and they should, I think, be able to file complaints. So I don't know what that number is, but I think it's more than 2.
Thank you, Mayor. My last comments is 2 comments or questions. The mayor, of course, used like the ship analogy. When we were talking about like, no, we're not, the ship is not sinking because we're more proactive. To me, it's like, well, you're not letting any more passengers on. You're limiting the amount of complaints that can come into the system. So obviously, it's not going to sink it because you're not letting the full amount of people onto the boat with the weight, and so that's how it's being maintained right now. And then the second thing that I wanted to say is that we contract for a lot of different city services, and so I think the city manager's office and the staff and the council should also consider looking to see if we actually need to contract out our code compliance department to a third party, because we do that all the time in city government. If the model that we're doing right now isn't working, and it hasn't been working for many years. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try and touch on a few things quickly, given the hour. First is that we need to understand that our code is complex. It's not easy. I mean, a weed at 6 inches is fairly easy to determine, but when we get into other things like our parking code on cars and other vehicles and how many can be where and in what parts of the yard and on the street and off the street and all of that, that gets quite complex. And that's why, in part, our citizen inspectors are not nearly as effective as our professional inspectors. So creating a system where we get more citizen inspections that are taking our professional inspectors away from doing their job is going to make the department less effective, not more effective. We've talked about, do we need more employees? And two things there. One is if we're going to consider that, we need to know, I'd like to know how many FTEs we have as compared to peer cities, certainly locally, but maybe, around the country as well, but certainly here in the valley where we can get that data very quickly. But adding employees doesn't always solve the problem. If you have a systemic problem, a system problem, adding more employees into a faulty system doesn't necessarily produce better results. To use the analogy, if the boat is sinking and you have 19 people with teacups shoveling water out, adding 2 more or 10 more is not necessarily going to help. You might think, well, then they need something bigger than teacups, but more effectively, you need to plug the hole in the boat first. And that's what I think that you've been trying to do, is work systematically into getting us to a more effective code department. And again, I'm frustrated just like the other council members and just like residents are, but we have to look past that and try to figure out how do we help you actually solve the problem. And that's what I want to do for you. Thank you.
Okay. Done beating this horse? Okay. So what do you need from us right now?
Mayor, this was for information. I'm not here for consensus on anything, so I'll leave it to the council to decide how to close this conversation.
Well, there's certainly more information has to come to all of us. I'm done beating the horse. Can I get a motion to go into exec?
So move.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?